Hi, I'm Ben.
And I'm Josh.
And this is the Bad at Magic podcast, a podcast about games, life, and other things. And welcome to episode 85.
Ben, what do you know about the Federalist Papers?
I have a book on my shelf that I've been intending to read called The Federalist Excerpts with Commentary, but I haven't ever read it.
So, okay, that's okay. They're a tough read. They're tough.
It was correspondence between Thomas Jefferson and John Adams back before the Constitution.
Close. It came out during October 1787 through April 1788. They were a series of essays that were written by three authors that were published anonymously in newspapers that were essays in support of the citizens of New York State ratifying the U.S. Constitution and becoming part or basically standing up the federal government.
Okay, but mainly supporting the idea of federalism, which was the idea of having both chambers of the House and the Senate so that there was population-based representation and state-based representation.
The specifics of that I do not know.
Okay.
That's a little too in-depth even for the research that I did. I spent
But what has this got to do with the number 85?
Well, there were 85 total Federalist Papers that were written.
Okay.
So, yeah, that's really all I have about the Federalist Papers. I know they're a part of the... So this was actually one of the better gifts that I got from my wife. She's a lover of books and a lover of history. And they have this thing called the Harvard... I don't know if it's the 4-foot shelf or the 6-foot shelf, but you can look it up. This is a thing that you can buy. And Harvard, every once in a while, will put out... This is the list of books that you, as an educated person, should have read in your life. And it's everything from Thomas Locke to Darwin to the Federalist Paper excerpts.
I love this idea.
It's this curated thing of this is what intelligent people know.
Okay, wait. So is it both the 4-foot shelf and the 6-foot shelf, or is it only one thing?
It's only one of those. I can't remember how long it is.
I would love the idea if you could buy an 8-foot version or a 6-foot version or a 4-foot version and what you cut out in those edits down to a smaller version.
I bought my wife, I want to say it's the 6-foot shelf, but I don't remember. But it's the Harvard X-foot shelf, whatever number fits in there.
Okay.
And it's a series of
Link
books
in the show notes.
that they all curate together, and I'll send you a picture of it. It sits on our bookshelf and makes us look learned.
Okay, placeholder for episode 86. I'm going to figure out what that list is. I'm going to send it to you in the form of a checklist, and you and I will check off how many of the books on this list we've read.
Okay, I'm going to veto that because I guarantee you it's less than 5.
Really?
This is very, very deep, in-depth, highbrow stuff. We'll have heard of most of it, but actually
we're talking Ulysses, the Odyssey kind of thing?
I think
the complete works of William Shakespeare.
You're gonna make me look it up, aren't you? It's not the complete works of William Shakespeare.
Don't. We'll do it for next time. It'll be great. Okay. So, Josh, last time I told you about a phenomenon and forbidden you from making sophomoric immature jokes, which you found yourself utterly incapable of, and about how I was going on websites and I was getting pop-ups trying to sell me homecoming dresses. And after I had that, you and I talked about it. I talked to my wife about it, and she made me realize something where I feel like I saw the code in the Matrix.
Okay.
I did not search for homecoming dresses this year, but I did last year.
Oh, okay.
Which means that they potentially are keeping that information about me instead of maybe the old dumb way of serving you up ads where you're oh, you just bought a toilet seat. Maybe you want 3 more. No, they're all right, he bought a homecoming dress. Next year, he's going to want another one.
I'll bet you it's even a couple of orders of magnitude even scarier. I'm sure that from your search history and from everything that you buy and all of the information they're gathering on you, they know how many kids you have and of what genders they are and probably roughly what age they are. And
so they could estimate, all right, this year he's going to need another homecoming dress. He'll need 2 this next year.
I'll bet you they know that. Bet you that they know that.
Okay. Now, I hadn't thought that deeply about it, but once my wife pointed that out, I thought, I don't put that past a database to just have a profile built of me and say someone who bought a homecoming dress this year is relatively likely to buy another one next year.
We were talking about the number one industry on the planet right now. This is how everything on the internet makes its money. You don't think they've got some 20-pound brain, double PhD type computer science nerds back there figuring out the most hardcore artificial intelligence? like Skynet is not going to be a military like tactical simulation. Skynet is going to be Google's advertising algorithm.
Yeah, and I think what really makes this next level is there aren't a bunch of guys sitting around brainstorming and going, guys, I got it. Homecoming dresses. No, they're just making an AI that like notices people's patterns and then turns that into ads that it serves you.
Yes, and there's all kinds of great videos to talk about how AI learns to the point where we don't understand how it works anymore.
Yeah,
it
learns things about us that we didn't know about ourselves.
There's this great story that I heard in college, and this was years ago, like long time before algorithms were like a thing of in the zeitgeist people talked about, where targeted advertising was still in the mail. They were sending flyers and stuff to people, right? And this guy called, I think it was Target or Walmart or somebody, the district office, super irate because they had sent targeted advertising to his daughter for like childcare stuff, for like diapers and like formula and like strollers and that kind of thing. And he was irate that she's 17. How dare you put these kinds of thoughts in her head or do all these things? And they apologized profusely. And then like a couple of weeks later reached out to him like wanting to see if they could make amends somehow. And then he had to apologize to them because it turns out he went and talked to his daughter about it and she was pregnant. Something about the internal algorithms of the store had caught that she was following the purchase patterns of a new mother.
Ah, nice. Yeah. Well, when that reaches the point where the AI can, instead of helping someone else make money on me, it can help me understand things about myself. I'm ready for that.
That exists, but it's all proprietary. It's behind paywalls. You don't get access to that.
That's how it feels to try to read like peer-reviewed journal articles. It's still just really obscure and hard to get to.
Yeah, it's not
$600 a year subscription or something.
Oh, I've been published in a journal that only other people that are published in journals read.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember them saying that about cybersecurity research when I was in the vault. Be like, yeah, this is where cybersecurity research comes to die. We'll learn secrets that only 10 other people can read. That's it.
With no way to practically implement them.
Yeah. So, did you was some ads trying to serve you up bridesmaid dresses?
Oh, no. I threw in this note because I read your note, and I just wanted to make sure I remembered to poke you about this.
Okay, go ahead.
Because if you're stressing about prom dresses, dude, I am sure that there's a ton of secondhand bridesmaids dresses to be had on the internet. Because those things get worn once to some crazy party, and then they never want to be seen again by the person that wore them. So there's got to be a plethora of those out there.
Okay, but Josh, I want to tell you something about bridesmaids dresses that I think you probably know, but I just want to remind you of, and that is they're deliberately ugly.
They're deliberately ugly to us, Ben, to our generation. Who knows what the freaking younger generation thinks is attractive? Have you seen some of the crap they come up with?
Yeah, I don't know. I've taken my oldest daughter shopping when I was looking for homecoming dresses, and I found some that I thought were just fantastic, and she hated them. So I don't know. I don't know anything.
Well, that's because the ones that you want had like big ruffles coming out the shoulders, and then the bell bottom of the dress was like 6 feet across with like a rigid structure underneath.
No, cue like the what was the Steve Martin movie, Father of the Bride montage, where like she comes out and there's one that's like the skirt's really short or it's showing off cleavage and he's going no, and then she comes out in one that covers from like her neck down to her ankles and he's like, yeah.
That's the one. Oh, Ben, you poor repressed old guy.
That's not what happened. She just didn't like the dresses I liked.
We were at my son's flag. This is tied in, I promise. Just bear with me for a second. We were at my son's flag football game last night, and then my daughter is not entertained by the flag football games. And so we just usually send her as the gopher. It's like, oh, I finished my soda. Jane, go throw this away. Because she doesn't want to watch the game anyway, so she's just there to do stuff. She's grateful for the opportunity to get up and move around. And she takes this can of soda and starts walking off. And as she's walking away, my wife, Nicole, goes, don't flirt with your brother's friends. And then, it flew right over my daughter's head because she's 7, and that's not a thing.
So your wife said that for you?
She said that as a joke, mostly to me, yeah.
Okay.
And I looked at her, and she was expecting me to be, the typical dad, like what you did with the father-brother, like, no boys. But then I looked back at her and thought for a second, I go, but then who is she going to practice on? Like, these are skills that she's going to have at some point, right?
Did that catch her off guard?
It did a bit,
yeah.
But... she looked at me funny, but then had the same thought process that I did and just kind of like shrugged and nodded a little bit like, well, yeah, I guess that's true.
That's what's going on when you're 7 and 8 and 9 and 10 and 11. Yesterday, Josh, was Veterans Day in the United States, which is a day that we honor the service of anyone in the country that has served at some point in the armed services of the country. You and your wife are both veterans, so thank you, and Nicole, for your service. Where do you fall on all of the observations and honoring?
For me personally, I don't go out of my way to tell people that I was a veteran or that I served or that I did, all these amazing things to protect your freedom. Listeners, you're welcome. I don't do that. I'm not that guy. But like if I'm at a ball game and they say, "Oh, if you were in the armed forces or a first responder or whatever, stand up and get recognized." Like I'll stand up. Like okay. I'll acknowledge the fact that yes, I am a veteran, but I'm not going to go out of my way to slap you in the face with it.
Do you try to go to restaurants that give discounts to veterans and demand free food on Veterans Day?
I feel like you are trapping me in this, you jerk.
I didn't know the answer to this question before I asked. What did you do yesterday, Josh?
All right. So yesterday, I had a half day because that's just how my work goes. On a normal week, we'll work half days on Fridays. My wife was off because it was Veterans Day and she works for the government. And then my kids had off of school. My daughter was off with her grandma and her cousin doing some girly stuff. And so we were just kind of sitting around at home and I got done with work at around lunchtime. And my wife goes, "Hey, I just randomly found this ad for a new restaurant that showed up that is comic book themed, and they're doing 50% off for veterans on Veterans Day."
That's why you went there.
And I feel like you
No, I did not know that. All you said is, "Hey, look at this cool comic book themed restaurant." You didn't say anything about going there on Veterans Day because they offer a huge discount.
That's the only reason we went to this place.
Okay.
And it ended up being really.
How was it?
So the ambiance was cool. The service was restaurant service in 2022, which is mediocre at best.
It felt like they invested all their venture capital in their website.
The place was very well done. Like they spent a lot of money in the decor and making it look nice too. The food was I liked it, but it was super greasy. My wife felt a little sick the rest of the day. And the real kick to the knackers is the Veterans Day 50% off discount only applied to the people that could show that they were a veteran. And my wife didn't bring her ID. So I was the only one that got 50% off.
That's terrible. Sorry, Nicole. Thank you for your service. Okay, so that made me think, what other holidays do we do this thing? We're trying to recognize a group of people and we're doing something special. Like if it's Father's Day or Mother's Day, there's like a gift or breakfast in bed, those kinds of things. There, Valentine's Day, there's typically like restaurants offer some kind of like package deal for couples. Veterans Day, I guess there's parades and flags and discounts, and we're just trying to show a group of living people that we appreciate them.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know of any other real holidays. St. Patrick's Day comes to mind for anyone that's Irish, but I don't know if that's us celebrating that they're Irish or them celebrating that they're Irish, so that might not count.
Yeah.
Thanksgiving, you give thanks for all the people and things in your life that you're thankful for. Hopefully that's, more than just like your cats or your pets.
Yeah. By spending 15% more on food, I saw this infographic. I'll put it up if I can find it, of how much more everything's going to cost this Thanksgiving. But right now, the crisis we're having in my house is that about 6 weeks ago, my oven stopped working.
Oh, no. Ben. Thanksgiving is coming.
This is a crisis. I knew you would appreciate this, Josh. Of all people, I knew you would appreciate this. So I opened a trouble ticket with my property management company, and they've been contacting the homeowner, and they still have not fixed my oven. I do not have a functioning oven in my house, Josh, and we are having 6 guests come over. There's going to be, 13 people in this house hungry for things that are cooked in ovens that we don't have.
They're going to wait you out. They know that these people are coming. Oh, it's Thanksgiving. He has to have an oven. He'll buy the oven himself. They're waiting you out.
That's definitely not what's happening. This may be dramatic. We'll see. Next time we talk, it will be after Thanksgiving. So I'll let you know.
Ben versus bureaucracy. Got to get the oven in place.
I'm glad you appreciate this.
I'll tell you right now, if my oven stopped working tomorrow, my wife would insist that she needs a double oven because she does a lot of baking. And then, but the double oven doesn't fit where the current oven is, so we'd have to move it over here, which means we need to replace this section of cabinets, and now we're just redoing the kitchen. That's what would happen if my oven stopped working.
But would she do it 2 weeks before Thanksgiving?
No, I don't know. I don't know. Like, if it happened right now, I don't know. It would be tight.
Yeah. It's doing this stupid thing where it gives an error code that thinks that the lock is malfunctioning, which is a safety device because of the self-cleaning feature. And so it won't do anything. It just gives an error code and it won't work.
Oh, well, Ben, you're a homeowner, or you're not a homeowner, but you live in the house, right?
Yeah.
Like, just YouTube tutorial this stuff, man. That's probably 1 or 2 parts tops. And if it's not those parts that you can replace, then it's going to be the control board. If it's the control board, now you've got to wait for the homeowner again. But if you can get a $15 replacement part on Amazon, spend an hour or 2 on YouTube tutorials and knock this thing out.
All right. I may look at that after we get done here, but there's the other side of this, the bin versus bureaucracy piece, which is I need to leave this alone because if I mess with it, it complicates the assistance and the property management and the homeowner piece. This is not my oven.
This is...
Of course, I replace light bulbs and fix squeaky hinges and stuff like that. But if I take the oven apart and then they come and say, "Oh, the renter messed it up," now I've got to buy them a whole new oven.
I mean, you're technically right. I don't know, because you have no control over the service guy that's going to come out to this thing. Like, I don't know. Working with like these independent third parties is just going to be a nightmare, dude.
Yeah. All right. Well, I don't even know what my plan B is. Like, get an Airbnb and cook Thanksgiving dinner. I don't even know.
I think it's going to the Chinese food restaurant and having basted duck, like
duck
Christmas
with the head
style.
on.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Ugh. All right, it's time for Bad at Husbanding. I think we're both bad at husbanding all the time, but you have a story this time.
I do have a story this time. Okay, Ben, I've been struggling. I've been struggling so bad, and today it catalyzed, and I was catty, and I was a bad husband. And so here's the story. Oh, you might recall a few days ago I sent you a link to one of the Magic Gathering secret layers.
Yes, which is a version of cards that have already been printed that are printed in a new format with the express purpose of being collectible and appealing to certain subgroups of people.
Right. And so Wizards has taken upon themselves to curate these little packages. They call them secret layers. And there'll be 4, 5, 6 cards that they'll have a special artist do, like you talked about.
I've bought, I think, 4 of them over
Really?
the lifetime. Yeah, I have one that are like My Little Pony.
Yeah,
I have the My Little Pony set. They're really cool.
I didn't learn about the My Little Pony set until after it was a thing, and I didn't get them, and I've forever regretted not having the My Little Pony.
Now I know what to give you when it's been long enough that you've forgotten about this conversation. All right, so you looked it up in Secret Lair. Go ahead.
So that's the thing is I usually I'm not on there. I'm not going to their site and checking like, ooh, is there any new Secret Lairs? I don't do that. But they're a part of Magic culture, and so they creep into like the YouTube videos and stuff that I watch as I'm consuming my normal media on schedule.
Yeah,
and
they're special. They're collectible. They're different.
Yeah, and Prof at Tellurian Community College has a wonderful YouTube channel about Magic Gathering. I really like his opinion pieces, and he talks about and breaks down the fiscal value of every secret layer that comes out.
Okay.
And so I'm watching his videos, and through that, I get to see what the secret layers are. And one of them that came out is perfect for my commander deck.
Oh.
It's the 4 blue. I mean, they're 4 artifacts. Or no, it's like 3 artifacts and a planeswalker. It's all blue. Every one of those cards I already run in my commander deck, and it's done by this very awesome Japanese. Every single one, yeah. I have a copy of every single one of those cards in my commander deck right now.
So I want to tell people about the culture that you're kind of touching on. And that is, when you have a commander deck, the intent is that you'll keep it for a long time. So people generally will try to make their commander decks even more beautiful by getting premium or exclusive versions of cards or foil versions of cards, so that it isn't just a 100-card deck, but it's a special 100-card deck.
Well, and Commander as a format is eternal. These cards will never rotate out. They will never go bad. Unless they are banned for some reason.
Right.
Like they don't change. The idea
there's not a lot of disincentive to blinging out your commander deck.
Yes. When I first played Magic the Gathering, I was at the opposite of the spectrum. I played Standard, and I had to spend probably upwards of $2,000 a year just in cards to keep up.
Right.
But the idea of having just one deck that never changes that I can just tinker with, change a card here and there, like I'm hoping, and I've been using that to scratch the Magic the Gathering itch in my brain for the last 7 months.
Yeah, people call it foiling out. I'm foiling out my Commander deck.
Well, I don't even want the foil versions. I don't
Sure.
particularly
The
like
secret lair versions.
But these secret lair versions of these cards, it's done by a Japanese manga artist, and all of the art on it look amazing. I don't know. This is one of the few secret lairs I've seen. I'm like, wow, that looks really awesome. And I already play all of these cards, and it's $30, and I keep finding myself randomly typing that web address back into my phone and just to look at the picture gallery.
Okay, Josh, you're doing that thing that we talked about in the pilot episode of the Bad at Magic podcast. Remind everyone who hasn't listened to episode 1 what that thing is.
So I have a tendency that when I see a thing in the world that flips enough switches in my brain, I will hyper fixate on it.
Yeah.
And just trap myself in this logical loop until either I cave and buy the thing or somebody helps me escape from this loop by buying it for me. So
okay, but what does this got to do with husbanding? That's just $30.
Well, and that's the thing is I didn't just send that text message to you. I sent it to my wife and be like, "What's our budget for Christmas presents for each other this year?" Haha, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And then she came back with, "We're not doing Christmas presents for each other this year." And I know we're not. I knew we weren't. But come on, Anyway, so this is the thing is, I feel guilty because this is a 100% want, not a need. I already have these cards. There's no reason to spend $30 on alternate, cool-looking copies of it. But at the same time, I can't get it out of my brain, and I just want them. And I want them for myself, which makes me feel guilty for wanting things for myself when I should be wanting things for my family. And then today it came to a head because I asked after I texted
right,
her,
you're stuck in the loop still.
I'm stuck in the loop, and so I've been bringing it up to her every day, subtly, but "Oh, hey, you see that thing I sent you? What do you think about those?" And then she's doing the thing that I'm doing to myself because I'm having that same argument where one side of my brain's is I want this, and the other side's we never play paper Magic. We have this deck, we have played it literally one time in the entire year that we've owned it. There's no reason to get alternate versions of cards you already own. All of this laundry list of reasons why it's just a waste of $30.
But that's not tipping the scale.
But I'm stuck. It doesn't, logically, the logic side of the argument always wins, but then the side that wants it just kind of kicks the gravel and feels bad. And
that was a good mental image.
So I'm just stuck in this loop of having the same argument with myself. Hey, remember that thing that was really awesome that we want? No,
but
shut up.
She's been married to you long enough that she could recognize this. It's not this specific situation. It's the pattern that you're following.
So this is where the bad husbanding comes out.
Okay?
Because today I brought it up to her again. And this time I dropped all pretense. I was like, "Hey, so listen, I feel guilty because I really want that thing that I sent you the other day. And it's $30 and I really want it there." And she goes... And she said all the same arguments that I said, when...
You'll shoot your eye out, kid.
Basically, when will you ever play with those cards? Do you need those cards? Is there something, you can't get them any other way? But here's the problem is, this is where the bad husband is then I catalyzed my discontent with the situation. All of that pressure that I'm feeling as the conflict in my brain, as the two sides of my brain are arguing with each other, I now got to externalize that conflict and be oh, it's her. She's the one that's stopping me from getting the thing that I want.
Oh, no.
And then I was mad about it.
Oh.
But I was mad in the way that a 5-year-old is mad and just really petty.
Yeah.
And so then I was yeah, you're right. And then I kind of I walked away from the room. But then I got halfway out of the room and I stopped and I turned back around. So remember how you've been talking about how you want new chairs for the patio? We have perfectly good chairs. There's no reason we need to get new chairs for the patio.
Oh, no.
And yeah,
this is one of those times where it's terrible to be right.
Yeah, but it's this is the thing. And so my brain being upset in the moment was looking for something that I could take this exact same mentality and point out her own hypocrisy, right?
Yeah.
Or if the petty version of that argument is that haha, you're no better than me. The pseudo-logical side is that well, these are the feelings that I'm experiencing, the same feelings that you're experiencing about this other thing here. And then she came back with a bunch of very valid arguments about why we need new patio chairs. We're having a bunch of people come over. We're going to be sitting outside. We need the seating, et cetera, et cetera. And then I was able to abort. Like, this is the first time in the middle.
Oh, thank you. Josh, I was on the edge of my seat. I'm so glad. Whew.
This is the first time I was able to, like, in the argument, like, tell her what I was feeling. Like, okay, you're right. I'm sorry. I'm being very petty because I really want this thing. And you told me no.
Good job.
And
that's not bad at husbanding.
I just need to get over that. It's bad at husbanding because I had to, like, I still did the petty thing first.
But you only went part of the way down that path.
I went
You
far
didn't double
enough.
down.
I was doubling down. Like, I was pushing my chips onto the table before I realized, wait, this is dumb, and got to pull them back. Like,
okay.
I shouldn't have been there in the first place.
Okay. I think if our listeners are like me, they listen to that situation you just described. Anyone that's had a long-term partner that they're connected with, and you've bound your lives and your finances together, but you're still separate people with separate things that you value and things that are important to you, listen to that and can fill that in with your thing you wanted as a proxy for whatever it is. You know, anything in your life that's maybe a hobby or frivolous or something that just tickles your fancy but isn't necessarily useful. Everyone's had a version of that discussion you just had. And you can go back and forth with the logical things about it, but if you can also recognize that, like you said, you'd gotten into that loop of it doesn't matter. The weighted average came out on the side of I want this thing. Regardless of all the practical and waste and expense and use and all that, I still want this thing.
And that's my problem, is I'm recognized that I'm stuck in this loop. And I wasn't going to her asking her to get it for me. I was going to her basically for permission. I wanted her to say, well, just go ahead and buy it because it'll make you feel better. And when she didn't say that thing, and when she did the thing that she does that she's so good at, and being logical and consistent and thinking things through the way that we both value and say that we want to do, I then externalized my own feelings onto her. And like, this entire situation is not her fault, and she's just being the voice of reason. I shouldn't be mad at her for that. I need to get over it.
But then when you stop being petty and acknowledged where you had gone, then you should, I don't know, that feels like the time where you've labeled the thing as what it is. Like, I understand we're kind of abandoning logic in here because this is the thing that falls in the special category that we need to treat different than the other things.
No, I don't. But that's the thing, Ben. I shouldn't. Like, this shouldn't get an exception just because I really, really want it. That's just like caving into a kid's tantrum at the toy store. Like, I need to be told no, and I need to accept that internally, and I need to get over it.
Will you forget about it?
No, I'll never forget, Ben.
Okay, so let me tell you a time this happened. You don't know the Paul Harvey on this one. So on episode 1 of the Bad at Magic podcast, you and I went to Grand Prix Las Vegas. We had a good discussion about a playmat that had Chandra, Flame Adept or something like that on it, and she's like making one of the 28 tornado.
Versions of Chandra. Yeah,
and she's awesome. And you told the story about how you saw it and wanted it and went away and kept coming back until you finally got it, even though you didn't need it. Well, what I didn't tell you is that there was another playmat at that event that I wanted that I didn't get at the time.
Oh no! Which one was it?
It was the Grand Prix Las Vegas 2019 playmat that had the Planeswalker symbol on a plain black playmat in chrome.
Oh, okay.
In foil, reflective rainbow foil right in the center. Basically, the only way to get it was to spend your prize tickets that you'd gotten from winning events. And by the time I'd saved up enough prize tickets to get one and went up to the counter, they'd already sold out of them.
Oh,
and they said, well, we don't have any more of the premium ones with the foil on it, but we have these plain ones with just a white logo on it.
Did you stamp your foot like a little kid like I did? Want the plain one? I want the foil one.
Like you said, kicked the gravel and regathered myself and spent my tickets on something else. I forget. But I've never been able to forget about that chrome playmat.
Okay, so now flash forward 3 years. We were just at Magic 30 a couple weekends ago.
Yes, well, actually, I'm going to back up about 2 months. So about 2 months ago, there was a guy in a store that's in the situation I've seen people get in where they're like, they don't have a reliable source of income, but they're still trying to keep their hobby afloat, so they're liquidating parts of their collection. And he had one of those playmats.
Ooh, the premium one.
Yes, and he was asking way too much for it.
What was he asking?
$200.
Oh, get out of town. That thing's like $100 tops.
Yeah, I know, and I bought it.
Ben, you didn't. You spent $200
but
on that.
I thought I'd forgotten about it. And then when I saw it, it all came rushing back. And I was like, I'll do anything. I really want that.
Oh, man. Chasing that dragon. Like, now you have the opportunity and you just...
It was terrible.
Oh, so, that's such a perfect...
All I'm saying is that if Nicole is like, Nicole, you're right. I totally see the logic of this. I shouldn't even want this thing at all. Like, you're never going to escape it.
That's such a weird, so many things coalesce to make that happen. Like the fact that you really wanted it and that you played really hard in the tournament to get the tickets to get the thing, and then they were sold out. So it felt like it was snatched away from your grasp just as you were able to attain it. And then the next time you see it in the wild, like it comes back, and all of those, like the urgency, the scarcity, all of it comes crashing down on you.
Yes. You nailed it. That's exactly what happened. It's like Charlie Bucket. He finally saved up enough money to get that one candy bar, and he opens it and thinks this is going to be it, and he opens it up, and it's not there. And so he gives up. All his hopes and dreams come crashing down.
Oh, Ben. Then what's really that? All right. So I talked about a kick to the knackers earlier. What's got to be that for you this time was we went to Magic 30 2 weeks ago. And they had those playmats, like with the same kind of all black with the foil Magic logo and like Magic 30. And that was the only thing that was on it. And they were on sale. And I asked somebody, I'm like, oh, that's really nice. What is that? Oh, they're selling them over there for $130 each.
Yeah. Yeah. And if there were any maxim that's true in the Magic community, it's if you want something, someone else does too. Yep. And as long as this game continues to grow, that number of people grows, and stuff other than Oko Thief of Crowns doesn't go down.
That's
true. Whatever I could have gotten that playmat for if I bought it cash 3 years ago at Grand Prix Las Vegas 2019, it doubled in price, tripled in price since then.
It's still worth it. You could probably sell it for that amount. Yeah. Right now.
Anyway,
I mean, you bought it.
I'm glad I finally have it. All right, Josh, I want to give you, as a denizen of Magic Valley, is that what you guys call it?
No, it's just Phoenix. It's the Valley to us.
The Valley.
As if there's only one.
A chance to complain about the weather?
The weather, Ben.
Holy crap. Josh, I'm warning you. You're going to come across as tone deaf. We have listeners all over the world. But go ahead.
I reserve the right to complain about whatever I want to. This is my podcast.
It's my podcast.
I'm going to say a temperature, and all the listeners that are in your mind, think about what you think of as cold, subtract 10 from it, and then just hear that number. That's the number that we're talking about.
Okay.
Because I did mention earlier that we went to my son's flag football game the other night.
Yes.
And all of his games are in the evenings on Friday. Yeah, I mean the evenings, like his game didn't start till 7:30, and then his next game was not going to be until 8:30.
Dark out, lights on.
Oh yeah, it's dark out. They've got the field lights on and all that. But here's the thing, Ben. It's now November in Phoenix, and so now it's starting to get cold.
This is prime football season. It's a tradition.
We had a cold snap or something that happened this week because our temperatures went from like, oh, it's finally getting cool out to holy crap, we are freezing our butts off.
Okay.
Like, I'm surprised people aren't getting hypothermia. Like, we went to the football game last night. I was wearing long pants. I was wearing my heavy coat with it's got a fleece hoodie as a liner to this heavy coat. I had my gloves on. I had my beanie cap. And then my wife and my daughter were both wearing all of like the same kind of stuff, but they were also wrapped in blankets.
Listeners, I hope you're imagining all of this and thinking in your mind of how many degrees below zero it must have been in Phoenix for all of this to have been called for. Go ahead.
My daughter and my wife each had 2 blankets, okay? They had an under blanket and then an over blanket, just to make sure that we were all staying like tolerably warm for the duration of the 45 minutes that we were outside.
Yeah.
And I took
any frostbite, hypothermia?
It was a near thing. Luckily, like the kids playing football, they were wearing their long socks they had thermal under armor, like thermal underwear, like long pants, long sleeves, and then they were wearing their jerseys and shorts and stuff over that.
It must have been negative 40 degrees.
One of the dads brought a propane tank like that you'd use for your barbecue grill and hooked up a space heater thing to the top of it, just threaded it on and lit it up so it was blasting heat out for the kids to stand in front of while they were on the sidelines waiting for their turn to go back in. One of the moms brought chemical hand warmers for the kids so they can keep their hands nice and warm between plays and stuff.
Okay, you so caught me off guard with the portable propane heater. Like, wow.
Ben, I'm telling you, it was cold. We were all cold. Everybody was freezing outside, okay? And it doesn't matter what the number was. We were all freezing our butts off. And I sent you a picture. I wanted some sympathy from you, and I didn't get it. I sent you like a collage of me in all my heavy winter gear, and like, I'm freezing out here, man. And it had a little snippet of what the temperature was, and you just made fun of me.
Yeah, okay. So maybe don't say the number on the podcast.
Oh. Now that I've said all of these things and like told this elaborate story about how ridiculously cold it was, we're just going to ask and see if anybody can guess.
Yeah, well, I don't know, man, because I didn't feel. If you were trying to get sympathy from me, I misread it. Like, I thought you were trying to be deliberately ironic.
Well, and I knew that I was trying to be deliberately ironic, but I doubled down and reversed that narrative for the podcast because it's more funny, Ben. It's like the sophomore jokes. There are people that appreciate this.
I mean, it's the joke about, the temperature drops 10 degrees and everyone in Florida, it's like a national emergency.
All right, so I'm going to say the number. All right, you ready? Ben, yep. It was a frigid 56 degrees outside.
That is unbearable. I can't believe it. You know what? I changed my mind. This is outrageous.
Well,
call the people who set the temperature in Phoenix and tell them this is unacceptable and we're voting them out of office on Election Day 2022.
Unbearable. People, I'm surprised people didn't die. But the one good thing that's coming out of the cold weather is now that it's cold outside, my wife made her first batch of mulled cider today. It's been sitting in a crock pot all day. I am enjoying it here. I've got about a half a cup of cinnamon whiskey in it, and it's just the best.
If you can remember, text me the recipe, and I'll make a beautiful infographic and put it on our Facebook. So, because
it's got
I think we need to do that.
Oranges and stars of anise and cinnamon sticks and ginger and some cloves and like
that sounds awesome. We need all that. I'll overlay it over a beautiful picture of something holiday-y. Maybe you guys freezing in the cold at a football game, and then everyone can have your wife's mulled cider recipe.
Will do.
For Bad at Logic, I think it is an odd number episode. That means you have a bias for us.
I do. Thank you for introducing my segment. So again, listeners, we are running out of these cards. The Your Bias Is cards, the gift that has kept on giving for multiple episodes now. If you have something that we should replace this segment with, please let us know. Right now, the only thought I have to replace this segment is what I'm drinking currently every night, and then I would have to change what I'm drinking every night, and that sounds like such a hassle.
All right, Josh, I had a listener give me a great suggestion. I'll pitch it to you after the podcast.
All right, sounds good. All right, Ben, so the spotlight effect is you overestimate how much people notice how you look and act. The idea here, this also plays into the theory that I'd had years and years ago, is that you are the star of your own life. And so from your perspective, you are the most important character because you're the only person that's in every scene. But that makes you overestimate how important you are from other people's perspective.
The spotlight effect.
Yes. And so anytime that you are worried that like, oh, people are going to think I'm weird or I can't do this, people will look at me funny. Think about how often you look at other people and think the things that you're afraid other people are thinking about you.
Okay. I love that. I totally agree with you. But I think everyone has in mind some point in their life an outlier, something someone did that was so awesomely outrageous that to this day you can recall it like it happened a minute ago.
Obviously, you have this, so why don't you give us your story?
I'll go first, and I want you to think of yours. So at Brigham Young University, when you're a student back in the late 90s, early 2000s, the way that teachers would administer tests was that they wouldn't schedule class time for it. They had what was called the testing center. And all a teacher had to do was register a test with the testing center, give a start and end date, and then publish that to the students. And then during those days, it could be a week or 2 weeks, you had to go there during your free time, and then they would administer the test by the rules that the teacher gave to you. sometimes certain times a year it would get a bit crowded and you would kind of have to stand in line. And this is an anxious time. Imagine a whole bunch of students standing in line waiting to get up to the counter to show their student ID card and get handed an assessment of their knowledge on something that they may or may not have been studying for the past 6 weeks.
Okay.
And so it was one of those days. We were in line at the BYU Testing Center back in, I don't know, the year 2000, shuffling forward every few steps back and forth through this serpentine line. And off to the side, there's this staircase that goes up to nowhere. Students aren't allowed to go there, so it's just there. And we're all kind of in our own world thinking about the test we're about to fail. And then all of a sudden, one guy runs up to the staircase where everyone in line can see him. And he goes, "Hey, can anybody do this?" And he puts his fingers on his nose like this. And he does that.
Okay.
And when you see that from a distance, it's an optical illusion, and it looks like his arms were interlaced and then passed through each other. Yeah, see, you're trying to do it.
Oh, yeah, I'm doing it wrong.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so he went and did this and then did that.
Yeah, like that. Good.
Okay.
Listeners, try to do it. I'll see if I can figure out a way to put it up so you can see.
Is an optical illusion is a terrible thing to try to explain on a podcast.
Okay, so he does that on the staircase, and that's it. He doesn't say another word. He comes back down, and then everyone is kind of staring in bemusement off into the distance. And then the rest of that time through that line, every now and then, I'd look at someone and see them doing what you just did, where their arms were crossed and they're going...
How did you do that?
And it was the funniest thing. And it's been 22 years since that happened. And to this day, I can still recall it like it was yesterday.
I think this is the opposite of the bias that you're talking about. This kid,
the opposite of the spotlight effect. That guy got the spotlight.
Yeah, that's the thing. Is the bias is the spotlight effect. Like, you think the spotlight is on you all the time. That guy actually had a spotlight on him when he went to an elevated surface and yelled at a crowd, "Hey, everyone, look at me."
Okay, and it worked. So can you think of one of like some random stranger that to this day you can recall 20 years later?
So this is either a pro or a con of my personality, depending on your perspective. But I learned at a very young age not to care what other people thought about me. Because, oh God, that's such a long story. I'm not going to go into the details, but I remember I have vivid memories of lying in my bed trying to work through a social situation that had occurred that day that I still didn't understand. And at the end of it, my conclusion was, you know what? Screw it. I'm just going to do whatever I want, and I don't care what other people think about it. And
it wasn't that you learned the spotlight bias. It was like you just decided, you thought you had the spotlight on you, but you decided it didn't care. You didn't care.
Yeah, it's not about the spotlight. In this case, it was more about, like, I don't understand social interactions well enough to, like, try to make rules for it. Like, it's a whole thing. I don't want to get into that.
Okay.
But I do have, like, so my whole life, I don't care. I don't care. I'll wear whatever I want. I'll do whatever I want. Like, people can think whatever they're going to think. I don't care what other people think. That said, that mentality has led me to do things that only after they're called out, I realize they're unusual or odd. And so the only circumstance that I can think of, like, off the top of my head, is I recall during senior year in high school, we were going through finals, and it was block scheduling and all that, so we'd only have to go to, like, 2 hours of school a day, depending on your schedule, take some tests, and then, like, oh, well, your next test isn't until Wednesday, so we'll see you then. And so I remember I brought my chess set to school to kill the time between tests or whatever. And then me, my best friend, and my brother were all done. And so we decided to go to the Whataburger for lunch. Oh, Whataburger, sponsor the podcast, please. And we sat down in a booth at Whataburger. We had our sandwiches. We ate them. And I was like, oh, you guys want to play chess? Like, oh, yeah, sure. And so we busted out my chess set and set it up. And we spent the next 3 hours playing chess in Whataburger. And then, like, one of the employees came over and, like, what are you doing? Oh, we're playing chess. And he's like, why? And you just kind of caught us off guard, like, well, because, like, I don't know, we had it and we were bored, so we started playing chess. I should probably point out this is not like one of those little travel chess sets that you're probably thinking of, where little magnet discs with the colors painted on it. No, I brought one of those big, ginormous ones that folds in half that have pieces that are 8 inches tall.
8 inches?
Yeah, this chessboard was probably like 3 feet by 3 feet when it was unfolded. And
well,
it was
now I'm
tall
wondering
enough.
why it took them 3 hours to come over and ask you.
Well, that's you asked me if anytime I felt like the spotlight effect.
So you think about that stranger that came up and asked you what you were doing.
Yeah,
Okay.
Because then that was the clue to me that, oh, what I am doing is unusual.
Yeah, okay. Well, chess is a classic game. When you came back from Afghanistan, you brought me a gift that was a chess set. And it sits in our front entryway right inside my front door. It's beautiful. It's made out of stone, and it's really nice.
Oh, you see, this is a great example of how good gift giving carries on through the years, because I don't have any recollection of giving you anything from when I came back from my deployment.
Yeah.
And you have this treasured heirloom. Oh, that's so nice.
All right, for Bad at English today, Josh, I want to talk about a word that the British have that we don't really have a good substitute for. We kind of do, but they use it in a way that's much more versatile than us. And the word is pensioner. Have you ever heard the word pensioner before?
I have, but I read a lot of fantasy that's based in old England. This is somebody that has retired and is living on their pension.
Yes. So obviously outside of the United States, they have different national ways of dealing with providing a fixed income for people that no longer can care for themselves or whatever. So in the United States, we have Social Security and we call it that. But in the UK, when you're old enough to start collecting a government benefit, they call it a pension, or one from your company, then you become a pensioner. But the word has gotten a little bit broader since then, and it kind of comes to mean in a general sense, just like an old person.
Okay.
If you go in a restaurant and you are over 65 years old and they offer you a discount in America, what do we call that?
Well, not nice things, but the AARP discount or something.
The senior citizen discount.
There you go. Yeah, the senior citizen discount.
We call it the senior citizen discount. So in the UK, they might call it the pensioner discount.
Okay, so it's just a word in use.
Yes. So while it kind of generally means a very specific thing, it just becomes a broader word to mean all of that. I looked it up in the United States. Sometimes we use the word retiree. In New Zealand, they use the word superannuitant.
Superannuitant?
Because they started to collect annuities, which is 6 syllables. And I don't think that's an improvement. I like pensioner because it's only 3. Retiree is 4. Superannuitant, no.
Don't
New
come
Zealand,
at me
if you guys are listening, get out.
Don't come at me with your newspeak oh, this is too many syllables, we need to cut this down. You know, we can get rid of entire swaths of the language if we just replace everything with
grunts.
Prefaces. Oh, no, it's instead of, very, we can replace that with plus. And then, extremely very, we can just replace all that with double plus. Double plus good, Ben.
Yeah, that reminds me of one of those email forward things back before the days of memes and the internet, when somebody basically proposed simplifying English to remove all of the nonsense that we have, from remnants of the past. And it just gets ridiculous if you try to simplify it. We just have to deal with it and all of its eccentricities and problems.
I feel like we've had that conversation in part randomly throughout this podcast. Maybe that should be a segment. We should talk about English as an art versus English as a tool for communication.
Yeah, I think English's abiding characteristic is it is the melting pot of languages. It doesn't reject new things the way some languages do. Like French, for instance, has a committee that approves new words into the language. They talked about this on Pulp Fiction when they're talking about the fact that at McDonald's in France, they can't call it a quarter pounder. They had to come up with a new name for it that was a French word.
The Royale with cheese.
That. So, in English, if we come up with a new word, we just adopt it. We've got French words, we got Greek words, we got Latin words, we got German words. We just make them part of the language.
And that sounds all fair and good until you have a 7-year-old that's learning to read and doesn't want to, and you've got to shove this through her head. Well, why didn't I spell this right? I spelled it exactly like it sounds. Well, nothing is spelled exactly like it sounds.
Yeah, I loved your daughter's apology letter for when her and her brother got in a fight over being a snitch.
Yeah.
Just like that.
Oh, I don't know if this should make the final cut of the podcast, but I had a joke about English words versus American words. So what's the difference between color, C-O-L-O-R, and color, C-O-L-O-U-R, Ben?
What is the difference, Josh?
F-U, that's the difference.
All right, Josh. So we talked a little bit about being conscious about what others think of us. We talked about the fact that yesterday was Veterans Day. I think this is a perfect opportunity for you and I to kind of do a blowout and talk about military dress and appearance.
Wow, what an amazing coincidence that we talked about these two things together. And then you're right, Ben, we should totally talk for a main segment about dress and appearance in the military. What a random coincidence that just happened to line up.
So what is the first thing that comes to mind when I say that? Military dress and appearance. What do you think of?
Well, I was a member of the military, and I went to a military college. And so dress and appearance is a very, very loaded term when it comes to...
Yeah, it's kind of hyper in that situation.
Well, I don't know how it was for you. Your first, you did officer training.
I went to officer training school, which is 12 weeks of basic training.
Okay,
which is a long time for basic training, but it's not 4 years.
I went to 4 years of military school, and I was not allowed to wear clothes that weren't uniforms for the vast majority of it. I remember having one set of civilian clothes that I would go out in, and you had to earn the privilege of wearing them sometimes, right? As a freshman, we weren't allowed to have civilian clothes. Ever to even have them until 9/11 happened, and then it went to Force Protection Condition Delta, and then we don't want to set ourselves apart as members of the military, and so 6 months later, when they finally let us start leaving the base again for functions and events, they said the freshmen traditionally wore service dress whenever they left the base because that's what you wear. That's the only thing you got. We don't want to call them as members of the military because of this hyper-terrorism thing. And so then that was the first time we were allowed to wear civilian clothes.
Wow. Okay, that just brought up a whole bunch of things I wanted to talk about a little bit at a time. You brought them up all at once. So you basically, September 11th, 2001, caused us to grapple with some very firmly held, long-running traditions in the military. And that is when we have service members that represent the military, even in their leisure time, particularly academy cadets, we want them to still look the part because they're representing us. And one, that shows a positive light to people of what people in the military are, and it kind of keeps you guys in line because you got to dress like the clothes you're wearing, act like the clothes you're wearing.
Well, that, and you don't know, the upperclassmen are in civilian clothes, and you don't know, they might be following you around.
So there could be someone out there looking at you and knowing that you're acting a fool because you're dressed in your service dress.
You could totally get ambushed at Chipotle if you decided to unbutton your jacket.
Didn't you ever find it weird when you watch old war movies that were kind of set maybe in the time surrounding war, where they're going out on the town for the night and they're just wearing their service dress?
Well, and but pre 9/11, that's what it was.
And then they go get drunk and get a hooker.
Well, that was World War II, and that was still acceptable. World War II to about mid-70s, I think, is when it started to phase out. But you could still do all that stuff. Drink, have a good time. I mean, they even had, every base has an officers club that has a bar in it where you are expected to go, and you can go in uniform, and you can drink. And the idea there being that as an officer and a gentleman, you should be able to, even after ingesting alcohol, you should know your limits and be able to conduct yourself in a manner befitting the service.
Very good. Yeah, I wonder how much of a relationship there is because, you think of probably a few exceptions you've seen where somebody dressed in military uniform got out of control and how just really poorly that reflects on them and on the service.
I don't think it reflects poorly on the service. I think that's the spotlight effect. I think the service thinks it reflects poorly on the service. It actually reflects poorly on the individual. And anybody with half a brain in their head will be like, oh, that guy's an idiot, not the entire Air Force is a ridiculous waste of government funds.
Okay, I get that, but I want to take a huge issue with that because I don't think that's the case, particularly with people like cadets. So there was a scandal back in the early 90s that was called Tailhook. Do you remember this?
Yes.
All right. Do you want to give a rundown or do I?
So I wasn't in the military at the time. We heard a lot about it because it was tangentially related to the kind of crap that was happening at the academy when I was there. But essentially, it was a Navy problem where there was this hazing ritual that they would do to, it sounded like everybody, but this is the first time that females went through it, where they'd line a hallway and it was supposed to be
All right, I want to give a bit more context in that. So there's this annual conference where a bunch of naval aviators would get together.
Pilots.
That means they were wearing flight suits.
It's always pilots.
They would go to a convention center in a hotel in Vegas, and they would have some official purpose for being there. But really, this was an annual, what do we call it, boondoggle, where the real attraction was what you did after hours the rest of the time.
Hang on, time out. I don't think you're allowed to call a thing unless you've been to a thing like that thing. Like, you don't get to name it, Mr. I don't drink coffee. Like, that's like, you don't get to sit from your ivory tower and look down upon the rest of us scrubs down in the gutters and then get to use the words for what we're doing down here. I don't think
All right,
that's
now
fair.
it's my turn to say it's my podcast, and I'll say whatever I want.
Ha!
So
Got me.
these guys would go to Vegas for this conference, and over time, it was just kind of these kind of toxic traditions they were doing were starting to pile up until it just reached a point where there was actual like sexual assault and public indecency and stuff happening, and it just went too far, and it was this huge scandal. People got fired, people got dishonorably discharged, people got court-martialed. It was really bad, and not for a minute did anyone go, oh, that's just a few guys being idiots. That doesn't reflect on the Navy. Like,
You heard me at the beginning of the story. Oh, it's pilots. It's the pilots that are doing it.
okay, maybe you don't do that, but they were right to worry that they were, one, creating a culture where that kind of thing could happen and winking at it and letting it carry on even though they knew it was happening.
Okay. So, for sake of the discussion that we're having today, the assumption, at least at the high levels and from the members of the service, and this is the line. This is the line that we are told. You are a reflection upon the entire service, and you will dress and conduct yourself in a manner befitting that. And regardless of the reality, that's the perception, and so therefore that's where the regulations, that's the starting point for all of this dress and appearance anyway.
Okay, good. So what do you think of when you think of that? You know, you think of someone that's fit, young, sharp dressed, shiny boots, creases in their sleeves. Like what comes to mind?
What comes to mind is hours upon hours of every one of my weekends being poured down this drain of monotonous tasks.
you think of this like someone with PTSD. What do you think the general public thinks of when they think of military image?
All right, I'll answer your question, but I want to come back to my stories. Like the idea of dress and appearance, like that's a loaded term when you're talking to anybody that's been in the service because of all of the things that come with it.
Yeah.
So, but if you just said that to a civilian, I think it is what you're talking about. I think people still think of that 20-something kid stepping off the plane at the airport post World War II in his OD green khaki on khaki tie with it tucked in the flight cap tipped way off to the side. Having just come home from punching Hitler square in the face. Like that's what people think of. That's the ideal.
And we still try to make our uniforms kind of look like that to harken back to those days. The Army just went back to that uniform, the World War II era uniform.
With the belt and the tie.
Yeah, they call it they're pinks and greens, and I don't know why they call it that, but yeah.
Oh, that's the best uniform. It looks so good.
Yeah, we want that. We want to call to mind those traditions and ideas and nostalgia.
At the same time, like it can go too far. It can go too far.
Okay, so what types are there? Because when we say uniform, we're not just talking about one thing. As a member of the United States Air Force, how many different distinct uniforms did you have at any point in your career?
Let's see.
I'm thinking of probably at least 6.
I'm trying to think of how many uniforms I actually had, and so I had blues.
Blues is what we call service dress?
No. I'm talking about just blues, which is like a pair of blue pants, a button-up light blue shirt, tie optional, usually open collar if you're on casual.
Okay.
Then for the service dress, you would button the top button, put a tie on, and put a suit coat over that.
That has like the ribbons and
the ribbons and your tie, and all that thing. And then you would have either like the wheel cap or the flight cap. You have different kinds of
the bus driver hat or the floppy cap you can stick under your belt.
The bus driver hat was only useful because of the stuff that you could hide in it.
Like what?
That's where I kept all of my gloves. All of my gloves for all the different uniform combinations were in that hat, so it didn't matter what I was wearing. I could pull the hat down, pull the correct pair of gloves out, and put them on.
That's awesome. I've never heard of that before. That is fantastic.
Did you ever have to wear the white gloves?
Yeah. So when in 1995 I was in ROTC and I marched in the drill team and I wore white gloves for that.
The white gloves were
and the ascot.
They were such just a. Like, and they're white cloth gloves with the stitching. They stitched the 3 lines on the back of the hand just for showiness, I guess. And everybody thinks of those gloves, but only like cadets wear them. Like only in like the most formal or most ceremonious things are they actually worn out in the wild.
Yeah,
the rest of the
only time in the actual active duty Air Force I can think that people do that is when they're in the honor guard, the base honor guard, which are the people that full time do things like flag ceremonies and stuff like that. But it's not a primary duty.
Fun fact, do you know that the manufacturer makes those gloves too long? they're not supposed to come up your wrist, so you have to roll them under and tuck them so they just stop right at the end of the back of your hand.
Yeah, that's not a fun fact. Okay,
that is a fun fact. All right, hang on. So this, I need to give you some context, Ben. So like yes, I'm talking about all this like I have PTSD, but I also know a lot about it because from my sophomore to junior summer at the academy, I volunteered, tested, and tried out for and was accepted to a program where I was one of a handful of cadets that got to go down to Lackland Air Force Base and be part of the basic training regimen there. Like I was adopted by a training instructor with basics, real people that were enlisting in the Air Force, and I got to scream and yell at them and turn them into Air Force people over their time in basic training.
Yeah, I had no idea that happened. That we take basically cadets that aren't yet in the military and send them down to our basic training for our enlisted personnel and like put you, I don't know, make you an apprentice.
Yep, I was an apprentice training instructor. I wasn't allowed to do a bunch of stuff, but basically they just made me do a bunch of the dirty work. For example, the TIs were like, "Man, I'm really tired. I'm going to take a nap. He's going to go off shift in a few minutes. Can you go walk around the bay and then just like be scary for the next like 45 minutes and keep them on their toes?" Like, yeah, sir, I can totally do that.
Yeah. I always thought they were out there saying that kind of thing, but I had no evidence to prove it until now.
I also got taps on my shoes. So if you've never had taps on your shoes, it's the best.
Okay, I like that you're talking about this because what you're talking about is a whole category of uniform items that are like things that aren't prohibited but aren't also required. And so you're saying you put little bits of metal on the outside of your heels so that when you walk, it makes a clicking sound.
I went to the base. I'm spacing on the word for a person that works on shoes. Cobblist. I went to the cobbler. I went to the base cobbler, and I had him put metal plates nailed to the bottom of my shoes. And every time I stepped, like that would be the first thing that struck the ground is that little metal plate, and it made a very, very distinct click whenever you walked on a concrete surface.
That would strike a fear into the hearts of basic trainees all over Lackland Air Force Base, Texas.
Oh, Ben, I promise you, if I walked around in taps and you didn't know I was there, you would break out in a cold sweat too before you knew what was happening. It's just Pavlovian. But you were talking about, it's not, taps on your shoes is not prohibited. You, right now, in active duty, could go get taps put onto your boots for your everyday uniform, but there is a ridiculous stigma against doing that.
Yeah, wow, you would be that guy.
You are already that guy, so you should probably try it out. Just
no,
as
I'm a different kind of that guy than the one you're talking about. Because I have a beard right now. So there are... What I want to point out is that this family of uniforms you're talking about, the blues in the Air Force, and every service has their equivalent of it, has like a very lowest end where you're the most informal you can be, all the way up to the highest end where you're the most formal you can be. So at the low end, you're wearing like, I don't know, you could wear like barely polished boots underneath your blue pants. Blue pants, a short sleeve shirt with just minor accoutrements that barely make you look military, no tie, and that's it.
Open collar. You'll have epaulets that have your rank on it.
That is the base for all the way at the far end where you've got core frame shoes that are made out of black patent leather, shine to a high gloss shine, wool trousers, your service coat with all your medals and ribbons on it, everything, bus driver cap, white gloves, special belt around the outside, a white ascot, like everything all the way at the far extreme end of service dress.
No, okay, so... Oh, yeah. Dress and appearance. You're touching a nerve right now because no self-respecting person that thinks of themselves as upholding the military tradition would put on the most formal of formal uniforms and put on the fake leather plastic core frame shoes.
Okay, really?
No way, man. If you're going to that extreme, you're hand polishing those shoes.
Okay. Oh, fine. Good. Yeah, go ahead. So let's talk about the long-standing tradition of polishing shoes in the military. Because somewhere along the line, someone like, this is stupid. We could just make these shoes out of plastic and they'll stay shiny a lot longer.
And those are the core frames. They made plastic shoes that are super shiny. You don't have to do anything to them. You buff them with a cloth and they're good to go. But, all right, so it starts at the beginning. Like you have, back in World War II, you had boots. And it wasn't about polishing. It wasn't about them being shiny. It was about making them waterproof. They are leather. If they get,
I didn't know that.
They're leather. If they get wet, they dry back out. They'll get cracked and crumply and fall apart.
So you polish them to improve their serviceability.
The polish is just wax with some color added to it. And so you're supposed to...
somewhere along the line, it became a hazing ritual instead of... like the materials improved to the point where that was no longer for making them last longer.
So, Ben, this is... after I got back from my summer as being a TI assistant, I came in back to the cadet wing, and then I applied to be the group, not my squadron, but the group Stan Eval guy. The standards and evaluations person.
Standards and evaluation. You were the person that was designated to know what the rule book said and enforce it on your peers.
Yes. I inspected rooms. I inspected uniforms. I gave demerits. I was that guy. Everyone hated me.
You were a prefect.
Yes. No. Okay. So I went to a military academy under the impression that everyone there is going to be like me. Everyone there is going to try their best, and they're going to uphold all the rules, and it's going to be amazing and awesome.
Oh.
And Ben,
that's a sad day that thing dies.
I fell down that mountain of realization so hard. I came out with like the thickest scars and calluses. This is why, like, if you ever, like, you met me after I came out of that. Yeah. And I tried to be very chill. I tried to be very laid back. And I was so cynical and so bitter from falling down that mountain of my expectations.
We do that sometimes to our young people. That's unfortunate.
Anyway, I got that job because I had, hands down, the shiniest shoes that can exist on this earth, Ben.
Really?
So
you knew all the tips, all the tricks, every little thing you could do, and did them all.
You start with base polish. You put a nice thick layer on, and you can't use cloth that's too abrasive. You got to use 100% cotton balls, and you go through a lot of them. And you rub it all in until it's nice. You get a nice clear gloss, but that's not enough. Like, it's what you think of as shiny, that's where I would start from. Then for the parts that want to be super shiny, specifically the toes of your shoes, and everybody draws a different line where they want, okay, this is where my ultra shininess is going to start. You then put another super thick layer of shoe polish on, and get it kind of roughly buffed, but then you melt it with a lighter, okay? So you hold the shoe upside down over the open flame, which melts the wax into a liquid, which then fills in all the crevices and makes a perfectly smooth surface. And then you can buff that with a specific buffing cloth that's like sheep's wool or something. That's only for after you've done that process so it doesn't get dirty. And then I had, this was actually something that they sold in Texas, and I bought a couple bottles of it before I came back. You put a couple of drops they had liquid shoe polish, like liquid wax, that would then seal in that perfectly gloss shine. And they were absolutely mirrors, and it was great.
Would you say they're indistinguishable from the core frames?
Yeah, just the toe part. Yeah, absolutely perfectly reflective.
I've never seen those, and I apologize in advance for doing this to you, Josh. But let's say you're sitting in class in like a lecture hall, and you sat towards the edge, and someone like crawls across your legs because you're kind of a tall guy and steps on your shoes when they're trying to get to their seat. How does that make you feel inside?
So, first of all, You're presuming that not everyone else there also had to shine their shoes every night, and so we were all.
Come on, it happens.
It happens, but we were all very cognizant of each other's shoes. Okay,
all right,
that's one.
All right.
And the
so that would be really, really careless.
And the second thing is, I went to military school, Ben. I had nothing else to do. I did homework,
but sit around and
shine
your shoes.
I would turn on the TV and I would just shine my shoes for like an hour a night.
Okay, but for the most part, if you're wearing your service dress nowadays, you're wearing blues, which is just like blue polyester pants and a light blue shirt, or you're wearing your service dress, which is a tie and your service coat, and it's what you imagine when you think of a military person in their like business suit uniform.
And now the blues, that was the duty, the day-to-day like duty uniform for cadets for the first part of my cadet career. And then 9/11 happened.
Okay. Yeah, hang on. Okay, let's talk about 9/11 in just a second. We're trying to make a list of all the uniforms.
We are?
So,
is that
do
what
you
we're
count
doing?
blues and yes, do you count I asked you how many uniforms you've worn or possessed over the course of your career. Do you consider blues and service dress to be two separate uniforms or the same?
Blues, in my mind, is a spectrum. It's a sliding scale of formal to informal, starting with what you talked about with just the pants, open-collared shirt, and sliding all the way up to the full service dress with like the overcoat and the ascot.
Or even parade dress, yeah.
Maybe. Like, I had... So the Air Force doesn't have a separate parade dress. The cadet wing, the Air Force Academy, had a separate parade dress uniform. That was just the worst ever. So you can't say parade dress and put on that.
So let's not count that one. Okay. So is that one or two?
I think
blues and
blues is one with, I think, all right. I did think specifically of blues. There's a bunch of different ways of blues, and then service dress is two separate things.
Okay, so that's two uniforms. What else?
Then you had like your utility uniform, which is different depending on your career field. But typically, it started for me as the BDUs, the battle dress uniform, which was the woodland camouflage, which is just cargo pants and like a blouse top with an undershirt.
Which was straight out of the Vietnam era. It was made to help you be low visibility in the jungles of Southeast Asia.
It was modeled black, dark green, and dark brown.
And black, shiny, polished boots.
And black, shiny, polished boots, that's right.
And we just recently decommissioned what was called the fatigues, which was like a drab olive green uniform.
I missed that one. I think that one would have been cool to wear, which was just the solid, almost the same thing, but the shirt was tucked in and it was solid OD green. That's classy. I like that.
Now, give a quick rundown. You said, depending on your career field, what are some variants you would see based on career field?
All right, so if you were a pilot, if you were in not just a pilot, but if you were in an aviator, if you were enlisted air crew, for example, if you got onto an airplane, you wore a flight suit. And the idea is that the flight suit itself is like flame retardant and has some different... it's designed and built and sourced differently specifically for the things that they are doing. So
for things like if you ever had to pull the ejection handles on an aircraft kind of thing.
Yes, like there's pockets in places that don't interfere with wearing a G suit, for example. So like their pockets are think of cargo pockets like on the side of your hips. You can't have those pockets if you're wearing a G suit. So those pockets are down
around your ankles or up on your arms.
They're down on your calves and they're up on your shoulders. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see. If you actually went to combat, like you didn't wear BDUs, you wore a different uniform, the DCUs, the desert camouflage unit.
Yeah, okay. So back in our early career, that was like the chocolate chip uniform you think of like Norman Schwarzkopf wore during the first Desert Storm.
Yes, you did not wear that at home station. You were issued that uniform when you were going to deploy to the Middle East because they realized that, hey, woodland camouflage, not so great for the desert.
Okay, so that's 4 uniforms so far. We've got BDUs, DCUs, blues, and service dress. And flight suits.
That's 5.
That's 5.
And then about the time that I deployed, they were coming on to the ABUs, the Airman Battle Uniform,
which was designed to make you not visible if you were out on an airfield.
Is that what it was?
Yeah.
Oh, well, it was lighter colors. It was more modeled. I think it had better camouflage for both woodland areas and for the desert. Like it worked for both.
And it had a digitized pattern and some different pocket placements and different material types allowed for like warmer or colder weather, that kind of stuff.
That's a good one. The ABUs I really liked. Tan boots now. We switched from black to tan or green boots is what you wore with that one. That was all of the active duty uniforms I think that I ever wore.
Okay. So recently as the focus shifted from Vietnam to the Middle East to Afghanistan, they changed to an Army camouflage pattern called OCP, optical camouflage pattern. And the Air Force decided to save money. Instead of having their own distinctive uniform, they were just going to adopt the Army's uniform and have different patches.
That has been happening the entire time, Ben. Like the Army has way too many people, and they kind of split the bill with the Air Force for uniforms. Like
the Air Force swung back and forth. Because when we first joined the Air Force, we all wore BDUs, the Army and the Air Force. Then the Army got their own digitized pattern. We got our own digitized pattern. And then we went back to having the same uniforms as the Army again.
Well, it's because somebody at the Air Force realized that, hey, the Army puts way more time and attention into designing and making their uniforms. Maybe we should just ride their coattails. Because when I deployed with an Army unit. And to make sure I couldn't get distinguished out from the rest of the group, they gave me, at the time, the Army uniform.
Yeah, I forget what those were called.
I forget what they're called too. But I'll tell you, hands down, Ben, hands down, that is the most functional, the most comfortable, and the best uniform that I had ever worn. And I'm including the flight suit that I wore for 3 years.
Yeah. Okay. So I think we got them all. What about if you want to go to a really, really fancy party where you would normally wear a bow tie?
Oh, you jerk. Yes. You had to have mess dress. Mess dress is, I think we've talked about that before. That is the Air Force's version of a tuxedo. It has very formal pants that are very high-waisted. They come up past your navel. They have nice stripes down the side. You wear a cummerbund, which is always fancy. A white ruffled shirt with very fancy, those buttons. They're like the
studs.
The studs, like the fake buttons you have to push through from both layers of the shirt because they got the little jewels or whatever on the front.
And cufflinks.
French cuffed shirts with cufflinks. And then
a jacket. It doesn't have coattails, but
it comes up really high. It comes up to just like the base of your of like your rib cage, like a really high-waisted jacket, and it doesn't close in the front. Instead, it has a spot for two little buttons that are connected by a chain.
And then you have medals, like actual dangly medals.
The little ones, the little dangly medals, like not the full-size ones.
And then, of course, your rank and your specialty designators. Okay, so that's Mistress. That's 8. We're up to 8 uniforms. There's still one more.
Well, I had as a cadet, I also had like rain gear, which I never wore. I had
but those are just
uniform,
accessories.
which was terrible.
PT uniform.
Oh, Pete, you're right. That is a uniform. We have to have our running shorts that I swear, like the model that they showed to the brass, like this is the uniform that our company is going to make for all of your people, had like normal human length shorts. And then when the company got hired to actually make these things, the company decided, you know what? If we make these shorts like 5 inches shorter, we can make like 3 times as much for half the price. And so now all of those shorts are like the late 80s, I don't want to, that's a bad word, like nut huggers. Like they're super, super high and show a lot of thigh.
I get that, Josh. I'm going to go with Halen's razor here. I'm not going to say that it was malice to try to eke money out of a contract. I think that there were people in the military that says, no, those shorts are too long. They don't look military enough. Make them shorter.
That's even more malice than what I'm talking about. That's just malice on the military instead of the contractor.
Yeah, but that's what I think happened.
Okay.
I think someone deliberately made that decision.
So everyone will agree that the shorts are too short. Ask anyone in the Air Force, they will say the shorts are too short.
Blue shorts, gray shirt, which looks with reflective markings on them, so you could potentially be seen if you were out in hours of reduced daylight.
So those do work. I did run during hours of reduced daylight, and they are very reflective when headlights hit them, and because multiple people stopped because I was wearing that shirt.
Okay. Mission accomplished. So that's 9 different uniforms that we had or had to possess. And they're not cheap, like owning all of that. When you get done with a career in the military, you just have like a mountain of stuff that the government issued you for what? What is the point of all of that, Josh? Why do we do any of or all of that?
There's the book answer, Ben, and then there's the real answer.
I want them both.
Okay. So, like, the book answer is that any given day, you need to go to work and you need to be wearing the right thing in air quotes. And this is one of the nice things that I think, okay, so not a lot of silver linings to September 11th, but one of them was the fact that pre 9/11, 4 days out of 5, I was wearing blues, and then the 5th day I got to wear BDUs, like to school and to work.
Because we weren't at war.
Right.
You were just a student at university, and you could wear a nice shirt and slacks.
But that was the same thing out in the wild, out in the real Air Force, as people wore blues as the standard day-to-day working uniform, which was just a pair of dress pants and a button-up shirt.
Sure, if you were doing office-type work, if you were like a mechanic on the flight line, you were wearing fatigues or BDUs.
Right. Of course. Well, that changed after September 11th. We are at war, and so we are wearing the duty uniform forever. Going forward was the BDUs or the ABUs or the OCP or whatever the latest thing is. And I think that has stuck. I'm pretty sure the day-to-day working utility uniform is the camouflage.
Yes. It felt like, you're right, of all the things that happened where the world changed on September 11, 2001, that was one where we just kind of like decided that the military isn't ever really not at war.
Well, either that or everybody looked around after wearing like the utility uniform, the comfortable with big pockets that didn't have to be so immaculately ironed. And we're like, you know what? I don't really like the blues. You know what? I don't really like the blues either. Do we have to go back to those? Well, I mean, we're in charge. We don't have to. Like, I can see that happening in a conference room somewhere.
But it took a major precipitating event to allow all of that tradition to be questioned. And that's kind of what I want to get at. That's one of the themes, I think, of this discussion.
The ridiculous inertia?
Yes, exactly. So let's go back a long time and talk about, how we got to where we're at and what are the reasons that will allow there to be a change.
The Prussians in 1600. Are we starting at the beginning?
Yeah. So I went back way farther than that. Like, the earliest I could think of was maybe like Greek hoplites.
Oh, geez.
That wanted to basically show themselves as special forces. So they all wore red. But before there was any kind of like mass production or standardized parts or, interchangeable parts or those kinds of things, it was all just best effort. Like, they didn't have a factory that made this stuff. It was go to your wife and ask her to dye your tunic red.
If you had a wife. Good Lord.
Right. Even ones that we think of as being very uniform, like, for instance, the Chinese terracotta army, those like clay soldiers that were found underground. When you actually examine them, there's like 7 different styles of the armor that they're wearing. It's just the best you can.
Well, I mean, yeah, there's no, like you said, there's not mass production. Like a skilled artisan had to make armor back in the day, and that guy's going to put whatever flair on it he thinks works best.
Right. So it wasn't like in the name of trying to make everyone look the same. It was in the name of trying to get them to just utilize the best technology that was available of that day. Whatever the best shields or helmets were, everybody wore those.
I really hope there's some brass at the DoD that's listening to this podcast. Listen, guys, function over form. Do we have to sacrifice and spend so much effort looking the same when, like, we're just getting the job done?
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about that some more. So then you get into the Roman era, and the Romans realized there was value in having all their soldiers look the same. It gave them cachet. It made them be feared. And so they started to actually standardize some more so that when a Roman legion came, people knew what they looked like.
Well, and it does... So that's another thing that the uniform does in an active duty sense. Like if you're actually on the front lines fighting in combat, it can help generate this sense of identity. If you all look the same and all of them look different, like that just reinforces your belonging to this group and the otherness of the other group. And so it helps the psychological effects of having an organized military.
And even more than that, when you get into like the Napoleon era, then you have generals that are moving people around the battlefield like pieces on a chessboard. And if your soldiers are distinctively colored different than theirs, you can kind of see where they are and make movements and give orders accordingly. But if they all look the same, then you can't really do that.
If anybody's wondering why it took us so long to adopt camouflage, it's because it was actually advantageous to be able to identify your soldiers distinctly from other soldiers at great distances with nothing but your naked eye.
Right. And then we invented the rifle, and that no longer was an advantage.
When firearms got to the point where you could kill somebody without volleying them, then yes, now it makes sense that we should be hiding.
So... rifles and smokeless powder made it so that field soldiers didn't want to be easy to be seen and led to the adoption of drab earth tones. This happened roughly around the turn of the 20th century, World War I era. Suddenly, all the uniforms became earth tones, drab.
Ben, put your mind, like I think about this sometimes. Think about being a general when World War I hit, okay?
Uh-huh.
Because you grew up. When you grew up, it was still like rifles were good, but they were still kind of crap. And everybody had one, and there was tactics that worked. And like, especially like the British military, where their whole thing was infantry advance supported by artillery. And then World War I happens. The Germans come at you with tanks and machine guns. And everything that you have ever learned, your entire military career up to this point, is completely useless. And you have to reinvent everything on the fly.
Oh, yeah. There was so many technological advancements that just turned that into a horrible slog. Chemical weapons,
and boy, howdy,
artillery,
it's a good thing that
aircraft.
It's a good thing that old guys that have been in charge for a long time are so nimble when it comes to adopting new technologies and things to do. So that way,
a lot of people died.
A lot of people died because
they're trying to use old tactics in a new war
over and over again. It's like, well, the last 3 infantry charges into the machine gun nest didn't work. Maybe the 4th one will.
Yeah. Well, the most recent major conflict before that for a lot of U.S. soldiers, of course, was the American Civil War. And in there you think of like the Union Army wearing navy blue and the Rebel Army wearing gray. And maybe when we depict that in Civil War reenactments, it looks really uniform. But it was just kind of a best effort. Ask your wife.
Here are your colors. Like, try to wear these. Like it was like a pickup softball match. It's like, do your best to wear these colors.
At the onset of the war, you have to think about this. Like, these are just conscripts out of like, okay, grab a gun and come to the fight. They didn't have uniforms. There was no factory mass producing these things. So some eventually they got the Union into Federal blue, but they still had guys that were wearing green and others. Confederate soldiers used a variety of dyes that would kind of fade and turn into like a butternut color rather than gray.
Butternut.
Anyway, So World War I, World War II hits, and we've achieved mass production, and we're starting to centrally produce these things so that everybody looks the same. And this idea starts to take hold of. Here's what I want to say: that a lot of the assumptions we have now in the structure and execution of our military objectives are because of what I call the fundamental manpower paradigm of the military, which is everyone's replaceable. We want you to look like a cog in a machine because we're going to replace you. Every single person out there can be replaced. So everyone looks exactly the same, and I just need a certain number of you, and we're going to go charge that hill, achieve that objective, and get it done.
I'm running into this problem because I'm trying to adopt a new mentality because in the firm that I work at, there's only 4 of us, right? But whenever we sit down to talk about processes, I'm always referencing positions and not people. There are 4 of us. I'm like, okay, so then this task will be handled by the support staff. And then somebody will stop me like, why do you keep saying support staff?
You mean Rebecca?
You mean me. And I'm like, yes, I mean you. But what happens if you get hit by a bus? What happens if you go away? And she's like, why would you even think that? I'm like, because I grew up in the military where half of the guys that I started working with today are going to be gone in 6 months. And I have to design everything to be completely personnel
process
independent.
Oriented.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, good. Yes. Now, in all of that, there was a lot of long-held firm traditions of, gold buttons and stripes and things and giant ceremonial mustaches and fancy hats with feathers in them and button coats and all those kinds of things that made someone look distinctive as a member of the military.
Don't forget swords, Ben. And
swords.
As a cadet, I got to wear a saber. And I got to use it in formation for parades and things. And that was probably the funnest thing I got to do.
Did you ever train in any kind of tactics that would make that actually useful to you?
Oh, like in a combat situation?
Yeah.
No, these were 100% decorative pieces of crap. They are just for marching and looking fancy.
Got it. Yeah, and that is supposed to... Did someone ever give you a lecture and say, we're giving you this sword because, and then fill in the blank? Like what?
Yes.
What's the point of it?
The lecture was, we are giving you this sword to be used in these specific, fancy, marching around, looking good circumstances, and that's it.
Didn't they give you some, polished speech about the tradition of the saber in combat and harkens back to the days of, Clausewitz? I don't know.
So, every military base has an honor guard, we also had what's called a saber guard. And they're, where our honor guard was specialized in, taking the flag up and down and doing, all of the fancy rifle drills, the saber guard was specialized in doing all fancy saber drills, like all the sword tricks and throwing things around and juggling knives and that kind of stuff. They probably got that speech. I never did. I went down to the uniform room and said, hey, I am this rank in my squadron. I will need a saber for marching to lunch every day. They said, okay, here's your saber. It's this long. This is how you wear it. Cool, thanks. And then I left.
I love that idea that you just got it issued by some quartermaster and you didn't get some long speech about the tradition and pomp and circumstance behind it. Because we like to do that. When we give you something like that, we want you to know why. Why is it we think that we're still hanging on to this relic of the past that's actually obsolete in any situation of modern combat?
For us, it distinguished the important people in a squadron-wide formation. If you have 120 people in a square that are all marching to lunch, you can quickly identify the ones that are important because they have swords.
Okay. I like that. It served a practical purpose. And they didn't take the time. That feels like a very American thing. So you know that I did a 3-year tour with the Royal Air Force in the United Kingdom where I was basically just embedded in their uniform, in their unit. And I was surprised at how many of those relics of the past they had. I'll give you one little video.
Wait. Hang on a second. You're surprised that the British military had leftover pomp and circumstance from yesteryear?
No, not just that general concept, but in how many of those kinds of things there were.
Well, you know how bureaucracies work. Look how laden down our bureaucracy is. It's only 200 years old. The British Empire has been around since forever. The literal Dark Ages. Of course they're going to have remnants of old nonsense hanging around.
Okay, so one of the things I didn't know that they do is that they still have what are called regiments, which are parts of the military that have a tradition that's regionalized. And even though, for instance, they're all part of the UK Army, there are regiments within that have their own culture and stuff. And while they're in their combat uniforms, they're all wearing the same uniform. They have little ways of distinguishing it. But when they dress up in, for instance, their mess dress, they look very, very different. Different color coats, different accoutrements, all those kinds of things.
Okay, so the regiments have much more individualized like uniform items.
Yes. So I was at this ball where we were all dressed in our mess dress with our bow ties and cummerbunds on. And I was in the bathroom at a men's urinal, as a lot of my stories go.
Apparently you're in the bathroom when all the important things happen.
Yeah, and I hear the door open, and I hear coming in what sounds like a scene from Back to the Future Part 3, where like you're at a saloon and the doors swing open and someone walks in and they're wearing the kind of spurs you would use to make a horse go faster. Clink, 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 clink. And I hear this guy walking towards me with these boot spurs on his uniform, and I kind of glance over at him. I'm like, I grasped my moment as an American, and I said, "This town ain't big enough for the both of us." And it was the 2-star.
Ben, if I had a nickel for every time I caught you breaking the men's room etiquette, like I'd be rich. Why? I'm hoping that he was drunk enough to laugh at the joke instead of yell at you.
Oh man, it was great. I don't think. It might be, if someone asked him, do you remember something a stranger said to you once 20 years later, he might say that moment.
There was a guy at a bathroom made fun of my spurs.
But they're wearing boot spurs. Like, that guy doesn't own a horse. He doesn't ride a horse. He doesn't use a horse. But when he gets dressed up for fancy parties, he puts spurs on his boots.
Were you ever at one of these fancy parties with a regiment, everybody wearing like red coats, and then like all of a sudden like the doors bust open and the music stops and everybody looks and it's a bunch of guys wearing green coats and then a brawl just breaks out with absolutely no explanation?
No, they just had friendly drinking. But these traditions are long held, and sometimes, like you said, they could actually get us killed. So we hang on to them. We have reasons we hang on to them because we want good order and discipline. We want a public image and stuff like that. But we might hold on to them so tightly that it prevents us from making important changes to the way we're structured, the way we do business, the way that we interrelate to each other. Like, for instance, you talking about being so process-oriented, it might be hurting your interpersonal relationships.
What interpersonal relationships?
So we have reasons that we change these things from time to time. Like in World War I, they're like, we keep getting shot with these fancy bright coats. How about we wear stuff the color of the dirt and then we'll get shot less?
I feel like that's an NCO had to point that out to the brass. Be like, hey, it's like, why are all your guys wearing brown shirts? Because all my guys are still alive, sir.
Yeah, like that. So there's, environmental reasons. There could also be legal reasons or traditional reasons where we finally come around and change. Like you mentioned how September 11th changed some of our assumptions about it. So today we have those 8 uniforms that I mentioned, probably closer to 6 that we wear in the Air Force. We have items that are mostly functional, at least I'd like to think. Especially with our combat uniforms, like you said, the pockets are in logical locations, and they have features like the little tabs on the sleeves that we can use to keep other people from shooting us when they have night vision gear on, or that we can access the pockets when we have body armor on, or those kinds.
You're talking about like the uniforms now. Some of the pockets have IR reflective tape that are built into the uniform, so you can be more visible in low light and thermal vision, and you have tabs that Velcro to cover those if you're in combat and you don't want to be seen by low light or thermal vision.
Yeah. So to the non-initiated, next time you see a military person, look up high on their left and right shoulders, and you'll see weird little Velcro straps. And that's what those are for. They cover little indicators that you have on your shoulders that could be used to be seen or not be seen as desired in combat.
Have you ever seen those guys like wearing those? Like, have you ever looked through night vision and look at those reflective tapes?
All right, I want to tell a story about this. So when I was in Italy, I was part of a quick reaction force where if there was ever a contingency, I had to grab my helmet and my body armor and run to the armory and grab a combat load of munitions and my rifle that I cleaned every month and run to wherever the conflict was, or ride such as it was. And there was one night we had an exercise. It was a live fire exercise, so I was carrying real ammunition and my real rifle and my Kevlar helmet with night vision gear on it. And they gave me a post where I basically had to observe the entrance to the facility I was supposed to be guarding. And I was laying in the grass, and it was cold, and there was frost on the grass. And I put my night vision gear on, and I was looking down the sights of my rifle at someone, far, far away, and I could see them so clearly because of this night vision gear. And I have never felt so hoo-ah, like military. It was so cool, Josh.
Did you get to see anybody else in their reflective tape with the?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's very visible.
It's brightly distinguishable from anything else.
The first time I had any experience with that is I was in Afghanistan, and our tiny little army base got mortared. Like I say, mortared, like the enemy attacked us. No, it wasn't like that. It was more like
random pot shots.
Yeah, it was more like a bunch of teenagers were bored and like, hey, what do you want to do Friday night? It's like, oh, let's lob some rounds that the Russians left here 60 years ago at the Americans and watch them like kicking an anthill, basically. Let's kick this anthill and see what happens. That's what they did. So they lobbed a couple of rounds at us, but they don't know how to aim. They didn't even have mortars. They had like a pipe, and they were just like, there, do that. And I'm sure none of the rounds landed anywhere near us, but at the same time, it was explosive ordnance disposal, EOD's job to go through the base and make sure that none of these rounds landed and didn't explode, and so there's just like a bomb.
I mean, you'd have a really bad day if you just accidentally came across one and it went off.
Yeah. But because I hung out with EOD all the time, because they were also Air Force and I was Air Force, so we were buddies, they're like, hey, LT, it's the middle of the night and we need somebody to help us walk around looking for bombs. You want to come with us? Hell yeah, I want to come look for bombs in the middle of the night. This sounds great. And then that's when I put on my night vision goggles and turned them on for the first time ever and learned how they work. And we were walking around like, hey, LT, you need to flip your tabs up. Like, what? And they told me, flip these tabs up to expose this tape so that way we don't shoot you or something. Like, what, really?
Right. Think you're a bad guy sneaking around the base.
Yeah. And that was the first time I had ever revealed those IR tabs and realized what they were for, is when I was looking at them like, oh, that's why you're so shiny when I'm looking at you in my night vision.
Nice. Yeah. So they have practical things. When we adopted the new Army uniform and the new Air Force uniform, we moved from a black shiny boot, like you said, that you had to put a lot of effort in to maintain, to a suede boot that very little effort you have to put into to maintain. And there was some resistance, some cultural resistance to it, because people took pride in the hazing ritual of spending so much time shining and keeping your boots looking good.
There was a I regret to say, we had a word for this when I was in the academy. That word was stract. Like
Stract.
S-T-R-A-C-T, stract.
What is it?
If you were stract, that means you were a person, like, think of a CrossFitter or somebody that's vegan that you know in your life that won't shut up about being CrossFitter.
That makes
vegan.
their life hard on purpose.
Yes. If you were stract, that means that you took in this military identity and decided, this is going to be my personality for the rest of my life. Those were the stract people.
Okay.
And Ben, I was stract. And
I did not expect you to say that.
It did not go well for me. It caused problems, but I was that guy. And
okay.
But at the same, so I took pride in my shiny boots, but at the same time, I did not fight the transition to the suede boots. Yeah. Because as part of the Army uniform, I had to wear those when I was down in the desert, and those were hands down. I spent a little extra money and got the ones with the zippers on the side instead of the laces. And those are the most comfortable boots that I've ever worn. Nice.
Yeah, I don't know why we fight so hard, but you can still see the guys who are stracked because they're still finding ways to do it the hard way.
Yeah.
It's so they can stand out from the crowd and they know each other. They'll see another stracked guy and they'll be like, aha, he's like me.
It's the secret handshake. I can identify you on the street. I could tell the other stracked people at the academy by the size of their creases in their BDU shirts. Because like I said... go ahead.
What you can say about these things as a whole is, for the most part, a great deal of thought and history has gone into what they're wearing now. Some guys have steel-toed boots, some guys have lighter boots. There's flame retardancy and well-thought-out locations for carrying important things, very specific things. Like when I carried 250 rounds of ammo, there had to be a place for it to go, and somebody thought all that out.
It's supposed to go in the ammo compartment of your Kevlar vest, Ben. Were you not wearing armor?
There was places for all that to go, and if you spent a magazine, there was a place for it to go. It was somebody thought through all this stuff and practiced it until you have what you have. So we have the modern military uniform, whether it's our dressy uniform or our utility uniform. Let's get into what the point of all that is.
The point?
So the first is to distinguish combatants. Like, I suppose you might be able to come up with and defend a point of view. You'd be like, well, you decide what's best for you and you wear that. You go down to your, local hunting supply store, pick the ideal form of camouflage for the terrain you're going to be in, come up with your own, set of carrying gear that you're wearing and pick your own rifle and stuff like that. But there's a lot of reasons to have everybody wearing the same thing.
Well, you say that, but it's a bell curve, okay? Because the middle of the bell curve is the active duty, just the general rank and file service member, and they're going to wear what they're told to wear. You wear your stuff, you wear this stuff. But if you get to the upper end outliers, like the real, truly special forces guys, like the Deltas, the not necessarily Rangers, but like Navy SEALs and those guys, Pararescue, yeah, all of them, they're going to look entirely different. Like a group of them are going to stand up, and you're going to tell that they're a group, but every one of them is going to look a little bit different because they've custom tailored their kit specifically for their needs.
Yeah, okay, not arguing with that. But we also want to be able to distinguish what country you're fighting for and the fact that you are a designated violence giver of that country.
This is an interesting point because we haven't had a real force-on-force, like actual stand-up military-to-military fight for, the Korean War, maybe?
I mean...
There's arguments to be made for Vietnam.
The Iraq War.
Well, it's still most, that there
was that.
The war part lasted 6 days, and then it turned into an insurgency.
But
again.
they were wearing uniforms, and we were wearing uniforms, and there was fighting and prisoners of war being taken, and all that. Let's not minimize their sacrifice and what happened.
I'm not trying to minimize that. I'm just curious to think of, because right now we have guys that we have to tell them, hey, wear this reflective belt in your camouflage when you're crossing the street so you don't get hit by a car. And so I'm curious what that mentality translates into an actual force-on-force stand-up when everybody's wearing camouflage that from a distance looks very similar.
Yeah, and we've been fighting, the war on terror for so long, and those guys don't wear uniforms, so it did get a bit muddled. But there are a lot of people who have their eye on the real purpose of a national defense force, which is, like you said, major total war between two great powers. Or more.
That's a whole other discussion about macroeconomics that I don't think we're capable of having.
Well, back following World War I and II, there were some smart people who got together and said, all right, even though international relations descended into violence, we still all have to agree that if that ever happens again, there's certain things that we will and won't do.
Okay.
And they signed things like the Geneva Conventions, and the group of all of that body of law that is roughly agreed upon by most of the world's governments is called the Laws of War.
And part of that is being able to identify the military from the civilian, and part of that is uniforms.
Right. And by wearing uniforms, it puts you into that group in those laws of war that, one, you're somebody that the other guys can shoot at, but also if you're taken prisoner, there's certain things they have to do. And if they don't, that's a war crime.
Yeah. Oh, hey, you can't torture me. This is a crime. Oh, no. Me, the person willing to torture another human being, is so worried about the repercussions.
I get it. I just read a book by Louis Zamperini called, it got made into a movie, Indomitable or something like that. Dang, I can't remember. I'll put a link in the show notes. But it was about him being a prisoner in Japan in World War II. And wow, what a clash of cultures that was, because the Japanese basically thought anyone who surrenders is a coward and therefore isn't worthy of your respect. And that's how they treated their prisoners. And so, yeah, it was pretty terrible for Japanese prisoners of war, more so than any. The guys that came back from a POW camp in Europe were living in the lap of luxury compared to the guys in Japanese POW camps.
Yeah, just look at what they, not Japan now, but historically what the Japanese army did to China. Yeah, it was a bad time.
Yeah. So there were some other reasons that they have you wear uniforms beside all right, this is one group and this is the other group and I can tell who's fighting and these guys are legal combatants. Also, it made it difficult to desert. Did you know this? That part of the reason of a military uniform is being a prisoner, an inmate. All right, we're going to give you this orange jumpsuit and these pants with black and white stripes so that if you try to run away, you'll be real easy to find.
In Arizona, we brought back the black and white stripes for that reason, and they also have pink underwear. They're only given pink underwear because it's indistinct, it's impossible to get rid of. Everybody knows what it is.
So that was historically part of the reason for military uniforms was if you deserted, we could find you relatively easily because you look different than everyone else. And then the opposite side of that is some people are attracted to that. Hey, come join the military and you can look really sharp in these fancy clothes that you're not allowed to wear any other time.
It's true. I mean, talking about like a World War II era or any kind of volunteer army, if you have like a low-income family that's trying to scrape money together to get a pair of shoes, being issued a brand new pair of very serviceable combat boots is probably awesome.
Yeah, and if you ever see like a Marine Corps billboard, invariably they will have a Marine looking really sharp in their service uniform. Like that is part of what attracts people to that service.
Yeah, that's one thing we didn't talk about is the fact that every other service has way more uniforms than the Air Force does.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So like how we talked about how there's a varying degrees of service dress, like the Navy has like 3 full branches of that. They got their whites and they got their khakis and they got their dress uniform.
Yeah. Like just triple the amount of actual clothing items that they have to have in their closet for no other reason than just to make sure we're all matching today. Remember everyone, Thursday is Whites Day and Friday is Khaki Day.
Yeah, and not only that, but they issue messages like the Marine Corps, for instance. They have their combat uniform, which is a slightly different camouflage pattern than everyone else, just because the Marines like to be different. And they are allowed to roll their sleeves up, but they send out a message to the entire force. As of this day, everyone, thou shalt roll your sleeves up, and then they'll send out the alternate message 6 months later to roll them back down.
The one guy,
and everyone will look the same.
The one guy in the Marine Corps that can still feel temperature has decreed that it is cold enough to roll your sleeves back down.
Right. There's also an element of nationalism, just looking like somebody that represents the country. Is there anyone that represents nationalism more than a military member in full uniform?
From a visual perception, no. Absolutely not. Like, that's what you picture.
There's also psychological reasons, like it being a symbol of pride and, belief, and it could potentially attract people to join. And then finally, there's the functional reasons, like you mentioned, how we changed from having bright, distinguishable, fancy, reflective, shiny uniforms to drab, blend in with the terrain, utilitarian uniforms. There's this conflict between wanting to look distinctive or be hidden, between being able to, if in low visibility conditions, to tell whether somebody's friend or foe, to give you protection, or even to help you stay cool when it's too hot or warm when it's too cold. We try to have things that fill all those purposes.
Well, this is part of the reason that we still have the blues. This is the reason they haven't gotten rid of the blues and that entire spectrum of uniform. Is because, yes, our day-to-day job, like just going to work and getting the grind done or going down range and performing the mission, it's going to be in this utilitarian, very useful, specifically designed for this purpose uniform. But then all the other times, we still have the pomp and circumstance. We still have the change of command ceremonies. We still have the parades. We still have the inspections. We still have the times where we're reinforcing this idea that we are a cohesive body of people all united by this common ideal, and we want to look nice for everyone on the outside, or maybe just for each other. And those are the times that we bust out the service dress and you do the lint rolling thing, and you put the big wheel cap on with all your gloves in it, and you go stand in line with everybody else looking exactly the same.
I like it. Well said. Okay, so in the military, every branch of the service has some type of official publication that's current and approved by the current leadership that tells what your values are. And for the Air Force, they're called Air Force Instructions, or AFIs. And AFI 1-1 is like the fundamental, it's like the preamble of the United States Constitution for the Air Force. We the people, of the United States, in order to form a perfect union, establish justice, all that stuff. So this is that for the Air Force, AFI 1-1. And in it, it kind of gives what are the officially published reasons for all of that stuff, to codify Air Force culture and all that kind of stuff. So I want to read a part of it to you that's about dress and appearance. First impressions are often drawn based upon appearance. That is why your appearance matters as much as your attitude about being a military member.
Oh, man.
Projecting a good military image reflects not only on you, but also on the Air Force. Appearance, both on and off duty, it matters both on and off duty, and involves more than just the clothes you wear. Projecting a professional image is paramount.
Man, I can hear those exact words being read by a very calm female voice as I am strapped to a chair with my eyes forced open watching some indoctrination video.
Okay, so then there's a whole chapter of this manual that basically gives all the reasoning behind that. There's a whole separate publication that gives the what and the how. This is just the why.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
So it basically it says it promotes esprit de corps, which is French for proud to belong, the spirit of the group.
Something like it's just a word unto itself now.
Here's a direct quote: "It's essential to an effective military force."
Okay, that's subjective, but whatever.
It very much is, but that's what it says. And then it has 5 elements: neatness, cleanliness, safety, uniformity, and military image.
Somebody pinned on Lieutenant Colonel for coming up with those 5 bullets.
I know.
And I hate them for it.
And then they list a bunch of no's. You know the no's. No hands in pockets, no public displays of affection, no smoking, no eating or drinking, and no talking on your cell phone.
I love how some of these are like, don't do any of these unless it's super iconic. Like
yes, and it states that in it. You're thinking about the public displays of affection, right?
I'm thinking of that, and I'm also thinking of the smoking. But you do the PDA one first. I know what you're thinking of. Everyone's thinking the same thing. They're thinking of the picture of the sailor on it was a VD,
yes.
a VJ or VE day in the ticker tape parade in New York that he grabbed a nurse and started making out with her on the street, which is sexual assault, by the way. But that is still a giant, like an iconic photo in time.
All right, I want to read what it says about public display of affection. Members, while in uniform or in civilian clothes, will not engage in public displays of affection. However, brief displays of affection may be permitted in situations where physical contact is commonly accepted etiquette, such as at weddings, graduation, promotion, retirement ceremony, or upon departure from or return from a deployment.
I'm glad I have the Air Force's permission to hug my wife that I haven't seen for 6 months.
Somebody thought to write that down.
Idiots. All right, for the smoking one.
Okay, go ahead. Why is that iconic?
So this is a little piece of lore that I love to death. Curtis E. LeMay, one of the founding fathers of the Air Force, the guy that came up with the idea of Strategic Air Command and like, oh, well, if they want to bomb us, we'll just bomb them twice as hard first. If LeMay was in charge of the military, we would have been like through World War III back in like the 50s. Anyway.
Yeah.
He was known for smoking ginormous cigars during every like major meeting that he ever had. Okay?
Right.
Like the entire time.
Like you could see him on the deck of an aircraft carrier with a thing in his mouth.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. Whenever he was at important meetings with people he didn't like, he was known to take a paperclip and straighten it and shove it down the center of his cigar before the meeting. So that the
ash would stay on?
Yeah, so the ash would never fall off, and it would distract the people that he was in the meeting with, looking at this 4 or 5 inches of ash that just will not fall off of his cigar.
That is iconic. All right, so back to what I said are the reasons that these things change. Why is smoking now prohibited when it used to be handed out in your K rations?
I think it was the same reason that smoking has fallen off of like just mainstream public image anyway. It's no longer a good image. There's overwhelming evidence that it's bad for you, and it doesn't uphold the same representations that it used to.
So something maybe 2 decades ago we'd have thought would stay around forever actually changed because of changes in society, our traditions, our culture, those kinds of things.
I feel like you're teeing up a discussion with that statement.
Yeah, so some of our other, because as much as we like to pretend like these things are immutable, they change all the time. So our military uniforms are the clothes that we wear, but there's also the personal grooming that goes along with it. And these kind of vary a little bit between the services, but there's some basic knows right now that maybe were different in the past, they're different now, they'll be different in the future. It says in the AFI, while every member may within limits express individuality, ... and then it gives a bunch of stuff you can't do. Like tattoos, brands, body piercings, that can get you from not being able to join the service in the first place or get you discharged if you break the rules about it.
Well, and it's not only that, but then dress and appearance is one of those things that's touchy when it comes to individuality because people will abuse it on both sides. So you see people that are like, well, I'm technically in the regs that look like trash. And then you see people that are like, you look terrible, you are out of regs, and you need to change the way that you look with no real foundation to that.
Yes. Good. That was a very good way of saying both sides of that. Yes.
I don't have a lot of personal experience with this side of it, but I know my wife who worked for the support squadron, she had real problems with specific people that were typically of a certain race, that were typically older, trying to call out people of another race because, like, oh, you're females. It's always females. Like, specifically, it was like older white NCOs calling out younger black airmen, like, oh, your hair is out of regs. Like, you can't do that with your hair. When wasn't.
Yeah, that's a great example of something that's changed probably since you left, where they've actually changed the written rules to allow us to be more culturally sensitive to people to have naturally acceptable hairstyles of, different races. Basically, it was not fair to people with naturally curly hair because they.
Well, and I'm not an expert in this, Ben, but like every black friend that I've ever had, anytime they talk about it, they have real problems maintaining their hair. Like there's a lot more that goes into it. And so to try to pigeonhole them into this box that was not designed for them isn't really fair.
Yeah, and the military takes some pride in looking different, but I agree, and I'm glad the Air Force and probably I'm assuming the other services have made some changes to be more culturally sensitive to just what's natural for people who don't look like white European settlers. So the other examples are things like tattoos, body piercing, things that you have a choice about. The military still likes to take a little bit of pride in like not looking like Post Malone.
I've had multiple NCOs that whenever I saw them in their blues, they were always wearing the long sleeves with the tie. And I'm like, hey, Master Sergeant, whoever, why are you always so spiffed up? Why are you always wearing the tie with the long sleeve? And he'd undo his cuff and roll his sleeve up like 1 inch and show his forearms that were completely
sleeve tattoo
and utterly covered in tattoos. It's like, I literally cannot wear the short sleeve uniform.
So the rule is that you must not display more than 25% of an exposed body part being tattooed. So if he was 100% tattooed, he can't show it.
But you can show tattoos.
But if you have like an anchor on your forearm, then you can show it.
Like, you talking about like Popeye? Is there anybody walking around with Popeye tattoos?
I've seen them. I've got a friend with one.
So, but that doesn't include the face or neck, I'm sure.
Yes, correct. However, I know the Army and the Marine Corps either were more strict or the same strict, but they were having problems meeting the recruiting deadline, their recruiting quotas, because they would have people who were otherwise fit for service, but the culture of society had changed to the point where the standards of the service were at conflict with the quality of the recruits they were being presented with.
It is far more acceptable in this day and age to have a neck tattoo than it was even 10 years ago, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And the military's not good at changing rapidly when things happen like that.
What? Get out of town. This giant bureaucracy is super nimble.
So there's a few other things. Shaving, obviously, there's a tradition of keeping a clean-shaven appearance. Not all militaries around the world have adhered to that. One reason the Air Force has their feet stuck in the mud on this is because of chemical warfare in the past requires you to potentially put on a gas mask at a moment's notice, and they don't have 100% confidence that people with a beard can get a good seal around a gas mask. Your life could potentially be in danger, and it could affect your combat effectiveness.
That kills me how much time and effort we spend talking about chemical warfare that, to my knowledge, has happened once in my lifetime. Like, there's been like one legitimate force-on-force chemical attack that I'm aware of.
I agree with you. I can't think of anything in my entire career in the Air Force there's been more time and attention spent to that's of less actual relevance. But I guess if you're trying to operate and an enemy utilizes chemical weapons, it is so disruptive to your ability to project military power that they still spend all the time focusing on all of the things associated with how to operate in the presence of chemical weapons.
I mean, think about every chemical weapons training you've ever had. Like, if we were actually subjected downrange to a chemical attack, it's going to be so disruptive to operations that it's going to be a complete wash anyway. Not to mention, like, I remember getting the EpiPens. Like, oh, here are the EpiPens you need if you are hit with a specific nerve agent. Be sure it is that specific nerve agent, because if you inject these into yourself and it is not that specific nerve agent, this EpiPen will kill you. However, the nerve toxin will kill you in like 20 seconds. So you have like about 10 seconds to figure out if you are subjected to the specific chemical attack that this will save your life from or otherwise kill you.
That's a little bit over dramatized, but I love it. It really does feel like, all right, now you have to cut the red wire or the blue wire, and you've got 10 seconds to figure out which one's the right one. Yes.
If you, I'm imagining, like, this sounds terrible, and this is completely unacceptable for the U.S. military, but the amount of time and effort and resources that the military pours into training and preparing people for chemical warfare, and compared to the likelihood of chemical warfare ever happening, it makes way more sense to just completely, like, if you get chemical weapons, you're all going to die. But it probably won't happen, so good luck.
Yeah, it's like the reason that we put, spend millions of dollars putting, like, ejection seats in aircraft. We could just be like, you know what, just try to keep it flying, and if you don't, I'm sorry. Like, you did the best you could.
Oh, pilots are going away anyway. We're going to fly drones. It'll be fine. We don't have guys in the plane anymore.
You're going to love Top Gun Maverick. Okay, there's one more thing I want to talk about, and then we'll wrap the discussion up. Okay. So once you got a force, you've equipped them with all this uniform, you've made them look the same in ways, then you still have to decide, all right, so when are times that they can and can't wear this? Because it isn't just all the time. So basically, you can wear it when you're performing official military duties, of course, when you're traveling, and even to social functions, like we've mentioned, is historically known and portrayed in popular media, movies and stuff like that, television shows.
They must have changed that, because when I was not allowed to wear military uniform when I was traveling.
It's traveling on official business.
Oh, okay. I never did that.
Yeah. Yes, you did.
I mean, like, to a conference or something, but I still wore civvies on the plane.
But like when you flew from Colorado Springs to Lackland to go be in basic training, like, you were supposed to wear your uniform in transit.
No, I wasn't.
Well, that was immediately after September 11th, and there was the worried about terrorist thing. It's gotten back to where we travel in uniform again.
Gotcha.
At least for domestic travel. Okay. So then there's the no's, and it's a long list, and this is a great example of the kind of list you get when people do stupid stuff, and then it gets written down somewhere.
On the list, yeah. Oh, we got to put that on the list.
No wearing your military uniform to do anything totalitarian, fascist, communist, or subversive. And it's the U.S. Attorney General who will make the call if you're doing these things. And it specifically says communist.
Interesting.
In the reg.
Red Scare.
If what you're doing would discredit the armed forces, if it's politically related, political activities, private employment, or commercial interests, off-duty employment, court hearings that would discredit the force. Think of A Few Good Men. Is that what it was called?
Yep. No, no, not Few Good Men. Yeah, You Can't Handle the Truth.
Yeah, what movie was that?
It was not A Few Good Men. It doesn't matter. Well, like, our listeners are...
that one.
Oh, hey, listener that's screaming at your podcast player right now. Thank you. That's very helpful.
You can't, like, mix and match off duty. Like, if you got, well, I'm not working right now, so, and these are the best boots I got or the best pants I got, I'll just wear these. No, you're not. You're only supposed to wear your military uniform. It gets weird where it talks about places that would primarily serve alcohol, or where most diners would wear business attire. Like, they don't want you to wear your uniform to that kind of place. And don't wear it while flying first class, because they don't want you to appear favoritism or that the government's wasting money.
Well, that sucks. If I got a free upgrade to first class, but I just happen to be in uniform, I'm supposed to turn it down? That's never happened. That has never happened.
That's what it says in the reg. I think, yeah.
Doesn't the reg mention that you're not supposed to wear the uniform if you're not a member of the military?
There's private laws that govern that.
Gotcha.
U.S. code, but this is two members of the military. This is AFI 1-1.
I still have all of my military uniforms, and every time I go paintballing, which admittedly hasn't been for several years, but I am in full head-to-toe tactical camouflage that was given to me by the U.S. government.
Do you take, like, the rank and your name tags off of it?
I did. Do I? I don't know. I don't think so. Why would I?
Because I think you can do that. I mean, that feels like a long time-honored tradition. There are occasions where, as a retiree or as a veteran, you could potentially put your uniform back on for certain reasons.
Okay. I don't know what those would be other than just goofing around.
Okay, so my uncle, who was a Purple Heart Vietnam veteran, died, and at his funeral, I wore my service dress. Now, I'm still active duty, but I don't think it would have been inappropriate for me to wear it to his funeral.
That's fair.
Just to honor his service. Okay, so yesterday was Veterans Day. We talk about honoring our veterans. The uniform becomes a symbol of pride, of nationalism, of when I go out and young children see me in uniform. This has happened to me, a dozen times in my life. Less as we get farther from September 11th. People would say to me, "Thank you for your service." What would you say when someone said that to you, Josh?
People do still say that to me. I have veteran on my ID card, and so people say, "Oh, well, thank you for your service," especially this last week. And the response that I've come up with is, "Oh, it was my pleasure." Because I don't want to say, "Oh, well, thanks for your thanks." That just seems weirdly reciprocal. I want to acknowledge that, you are acknowledging my service, and let you know that, "Oh, well, no problem." Is that what you're supposed to say? That sounds too douchey. So,
I like that. I heard someone say something once that I really liked, and I adopted it, and that's what I use.
What do you use?
It's thanks for your thanks, but it's in a way that is meaningful. Someone says, "Thank you for your service," and the person says in return, "Thank you for your support."
Oh, that's a good one.
I liked it too. So that's generally what I use. Another thing I had to do is stop making it personal, the spotlight bias. When they thank me for my service, they're not thanking me. They're thanking a person in uniform that represents the broader unit.
Oh, I just do enterprise IT support. You don't want to thank me.
Right. That's a terrible thing to say. They're thanking the guy that got, his leg blown off in a convoy in Afghanistan too.
Yeah.
And I can thank them on that person's behalf.
That makes sense. Okay.
So, all that being said, these things, as immutable as they feel, they change. There's societal reasons, there's legal reasons, there's environmental reasons. You mentioned September 11th being one of them. I don't know what the next will be and what will change, but I think we'll always have this tradition of having our servicemen who represent our country and who could potentially do violence on our behalf look distinctive for the purpose of looking alike, having clothing that's specific to the purpose they're serving, and representing national pride.
Ben, on this Veterans Day, that was yesterday, I want to thank you for your continued and ongoing service.
Thank you for your support.
Jerk.
If you had something you want to say, like the name of that movie with Jack Nicholson and Tom Cruise that we couldn't think of, or anything else that you want to share about your country of origin that I got wrong about UK or New Zealand or whatever, and you want to join in on the discussion, you can go to the subreddit and participate anonymously, or you can go on our Facebook page. Both links are in the show notes, and you can join in on the discussion.
I think it was A Few Good Men. I was thinking the right stuff, but I think it is A Few Good Men.
Okay.
Well, if you like what we do, consider sharing us with a friend. If you like us, maybe your friends will like us too. If you really want to show us some love, consider taking your phone out of your pocket and giving us a good review on the podcast player of your choice. We get tremendous visibility from that. Thank you very much. And if you want me and Ben to talk about esoteric things about being in the military and are just ridiculous different perspectives on the same crap, consider becoming a patron on our Patreon page.
And until next time, try to be a little less bad at magic.